Hey, 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 welcome back, everybody. Third time's a charm. Thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. We're just going to be here for a little bit, finishing up on something we were talking about, some more Tyree Nichols, some more situational stuff like this, and whatever else we talk about to close the night out. I appreciate you all so very much, and I hope to see you guys in the morning for a little bit of current events and a cup of joe with Dago. Hope to see you guys then for that as well. For those of you that can be there, I appreciate y'all so very much. Please share this out, you guys, to whoever and anyone you think would want to join us tonight for this as we close the night out with the last and final video of the night. Please hit the like button to make sure that it is liked out, and you guys can maybe help to get this in that algorithm if we have enough peeps in here. I greatly appreciate that as well, and I hope you're all having a wonderful night, and I hope it ends the best way possible. And I know mine will, because I'm in here with the best possible people on YouTube. So thank you guys so much for that. And for joining us here tonight as we get this show on the road. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. All right. Welcome back, everybody. Again, great to be here with y'all. I hope you guys had a great day. For those of you that I didn't see, for those of you that have shared this whole day with me today, thank you so very much. It's been a wonderful day. Hanging out with you all, talking about what we've talked about. There's been some sad stuff, but honestly, I'm glad I did it with you guys. I wouldn't rather do it with anybody else. So thank you again for that, guys. Please make sure to hit that like button as your way coming through that door. Share this out to anybody you think would be interested. Let's get this show rolling, guys. Grab somewhere comfortable to sit. Grab something to sit. Grab something to drink. Let's do this, you guys. Welcome all the beautiful people. I appreciate you very much. It has been a day, sunshine. You ain't lying, guys. I'm going to sleep hard tonight. That ain't no lie. That ain't no lie, but it's been worth every minute of it, guys. Every minute of it, it's been worth it all. I needed to catch up, guys. I didn't see you yesterday. I didn't see you guys. I haven't seen you guys as much as I used to, hardly at all, and I don't like that. But I'm trying to change that up, guys. I'm really excited about this morning show thing. I really am. I really enjoyed that this morning. I enjoyed you all. There was a good energy in there. Good vibe. It's early in the morning, so I'm pretty wired, especially after all the coffee I had. So, you know. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Speaking of, let's see who we got in here right now with us. Looks like Leslie and Billy's back in the house. Toby Marie, welcome back to you. I'm sorry to hear about your vehicle. Of course, my Doodlebug says, let's do it like it's Thanksgiving. Let's break it down, guys. Sunshine's in the house again. Great to see you, Sunshine. Mikey, my brother Mikey, back in the house tonight. Good to have you here, bro. Girls, welcome back to you. Miss Trish Crow, great to see you today. Niles Buckman, welcome back, my friend. Great to have you here. Great to see you. Alicia J, always a pleasure. Mr. James Tate, my friend, wonderful to see you. Thank you for joining us. And Marianne, we got the double deal tonight. What a treat. Good to see you, Miss Marianne. Thank you for joining us tonight. I hope Miss Barbara's okay. I haven't seen her all day today. Let me see here. Absolutely, Mr. James. We appreciate you. Come on in, everybody. Miss Sherry's in the house. Hit that, sharing this out, hitting that like button if we can. Michael. Crystal Williams. I'm just starting up, Miss Williams. Yes, I am, Crystal. Thank you so much for joining us again today. Yes, that's true, Miss Toby. That's very true. Hold on a minute here. What's happening, Captain Jack? Thanks. Good to see you, Miss Taylor. Welcome back and welcome to the Discord, Taylor. It was great to see you in there. I responded to you earlier. 26 awesome peeps in this house. And we got 18 likes. Let's make it work, guys. Let's make it work. Let's get them likes up there. Come on in, guys. I don't do Duncan. I do my own version, but yeah, I get what you're saying, Cap. Oh, shoot. I don't have YouTube Premium anymore, so I get commercials now. How about that one? I've been wondering why I'm getting these commercials. Damn it. I got to get that premium back. That explains that. I forgot about that. But that's why I appreciate those donations so much, guys, that we run with these. That's where that stuff goes. That pays for the premium. It pays for the YouTube, pays for the StreamYard, which has gone up again. It costs, it's crazy, you guys. It now costs $45 for the mid-range package on StreamYard just to be able to do basic stuff. It's stupid. They don't even give you that option anymore. When I first started off, it was the free one, then it was the $28 one, and then it was the $40-some one, I think it was. And then there's one that's like $100 a month, which I don't need any of that. So yeah. Where's he at? Is he visiting Papa? $25 peeps in here, 19 likes. We're getting there, guys. Come on in. Share it out if you will, please. Thank you to all the lurkers out there watching from the corner and the hallway. I appreciate you all so very much. The rest of y'all, don't forget to hit that like button on the right there when you come to the door. I appreciate that very much. It's Papa time. Well, you ain't alone, Doodle. You got us, of course. Again, Doodle, thank you for making that trip down there to the prison so we could get a little look of what was going on down there. It is appreciated very much. So I believe it is Friday, you guys. We're going to have the tomorrow night, just to reiterate everything again. Bling's back in the house. Welcome, Bling. Tomorrow night, I'm going to be joined by Lighting the Way, Miss PJ. Is going to be joining me so that we can go over more of Maury's case tomorrow night again. So be here for that. I think it's 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's going to be an interesting show. We're going to be having Lighting the Way up here. It's going to be her platform to explain some stuff. She's been involved in that case for quite a long time. She's worked with Julie, Maura's sister. And Friday, I think it is, Doodle. Remind me, Friday, we're going to be doing the Doug Teal, I believe is his last name, out of Missouri. Doug Teal. Thank you, Doodle. Doug Teal, Friday is going to be, it's another Missouri show, a lot like what we did for Miss Barb. To bring awareness to another one of these crazy cases out of Missouri that's not getting any justice. We will be joined by Doug's mother. She can tell the story, and like I said, we will go from there. And that me and Doodle will be presenting that Friday. I can't remember the exact time, but another one, yes. Miss Karen, that's her name. She's going to be joining us. So yes, I did see her in chat a few times in the past. She joined us, and I appreciate her very much. She was here supporting Durante. She was here supporting Miss Barbara, Maureen, and James. Or more. Wait, what did I just say? Marion, not Maureen. I'm so sorry about that, Marion. So yes, they've all been in the chat so very much. So we're going to be telling Doug's story with Miss Karen. So I would really, really appreciate the support. As many people as we can get in here for that to support Karen. She really needs it, guys. Again, it's another Missouri case that just does not have a good ending. And very soon here, I will be joining Miss Taylor over here and Arctic Fox at a roundtable discussion about some really touchy subjects as well. So I'm looking forward to all this stuff coming on, guys. It's really coming down the line fairly quickly. Welcome, Brittney. Thank you for joining us. And we will be revisiting the Summer Wells case here relatively soon as well. Of course, we're going to be following Sarah Boone's trial coming up here real close, the whole thing. We're also going to be following the Diddy stuff as that unfolds and seeing what else happens. So there's a lot going on, guys. We're never going to get bored. We'll always have the true crime to go to and never have to go to the drama. Understand that. So I appreciate you all being here for the true crime stuff and not the drama. Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, he's going to be joining us as well. The Central Oklahoma MMIP president will be there with us for that. I can't wait to be able to do that, Taylor, to make that up too. I feel so bad about that still. Excuse me. We have a calendar full of stuff. A calendar full. That's awesome, Bling. That as many people as you can bring for that one, because we're starting at the very beginning, the day that Summer went missing, and moving forward all the way to where we're at right now in that one, because it needs to be refreshed completely. There's too many. It's been too much time. So thank you for that, Bling. That'll be coming up here relatively soon. I'm thinking about, let's see, Wednesday. Tomorrow I got Thursday. Probably the beginning of next week we're going to do it. I'm sorry, Taylor, not he. Sorry about that. Thank you for correcting me. But anyway, yeah, the start of next week is probably going to be the Summerwell stuff. It's going to take a couple days. Can you please put out a list of show times on your community? Absolutely, Bling. That's awesome. I'm going to be Blue Eyes. Welcome back. Good to see you tonight. I'm going to be sticking as close as I can to this new schedule that we're running. I'm not going to guarantee the nighttime shows. I will guarantee you the morning and the afternoon shows, but I can't guarantee the nighttime shows only because there are things in real life that have been going on sometimes in the evenings, and I might not be able to do it. I'm going to try my hardest to do that. Of course, I'm going to be doing it Wednesday. And, depending on whatever time Taylor sets up her show, I don't care what's going on. Like I said, I'll be there if I got to stick an antenna to my butt and make myself have a signal. I don't care what's going on. Oh, no, you're fine. That's actually a really good idea, Blank. Like Doodle just said, it is a good idea on the community page. So we can do that. I'll get together with Doodle tomorrow to make the times 100%, and I'll post them. No problem. Well, that's the difference, Blue Eyes, is I'm going to be running a regular schedule now. For those of you that weren't in here this morning, I started a new show this morning. Oh, I know that, Molly. It's okay. I'm going to be running anywhere between 9 or 10. I'm going to try to go at 9. If I do it a couple times, I'll get used to it, and I'll have to make myself be up. If I have to have somebody call me to wake me up early enough, I will. I'm going to run from 9 to 11 or 10 to 12. And then after that, I'm going to come back in anywhere from 1 to 3 or 2 to 4. And if I do the evening shows, it's going to be from 7 to 9 or 8 to 10. That's how I'm going to try to run this schedule. And I'm Eastern time, Bling. Yes. Right now it's 10:27 p.m. here. And the fun thing about this whole thing is Doodlebug is going to be joining me for the morning show. When Mama Bear is going to be here when she can be, when she's not working, but Doodle will be a co-host as well on that show. So it's going to be a lot of fun, you guys. And all we're going to be doing on the morning shows is waking up, coffee, current events, what's going on around the world, new. You better come back, Mikey. Current events. I may even cover weather, sports, whatever's going on. Hell, if I could get Walt to come in and do the weather, that'd be awesome. That's okay, Bling. That's absolutely fine. Absolutely. That sounds like a plan, Doodle. As long as I get to bed around a certain time. Welcome, Truth Seeker. Truth Seeker says, Doodle, you certainly get around. You get around, Doodle, huh? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. 30 people in here with 34 likes. I don't know how you pulled that off, but that's awesome. Welcome, DS. Good evening. So that's what's up and coming, guys, just so you guys know. And of course, Friday nights, we're going to be doing the Paranormal, Creepy, and Unexplained show as the new name for that, because we have a lot of weird things going on out in the world nowadays that we're going to be covering on those shows Friday nights. Saturday nights are going to be proclaimed for our music streams when we have a decompression music stream. We may even do a football stream. Who knows? Since it's football season, we'll see what happens. Welcome back, Miss Paula. Good to see you tonight. Coffee first, then nothing. Another coffee. Let's see. That's what I'm doing with the coffee now. If I got you up at 5, like you ladies, I need a nap by 7. If I got up at 5, I got you. Yes, I understand. No worries. Welcome. All right. Get comfortable, guys. And we're about to get started here. And tonight, like I said, I'm on task. I'm being watched, you guys, and I have to be out of here by midnight or so, maybe 12:30 latest, since I started at 10:30. But I'm not going to take it any longer than that. Miss Jessica, welcome. Good to see you tonight. We've missed you as well. Great to have you here. For sure. 32 peeps, 37 likes. You guys are amazing. Thank you for that. So as a lot of you guys know, we were covering the Tyree Nichols stuff the other night. Miss Kimber must be in bed, and that's not okay. I understand. I wish I could have her back in here for it, but that's all right. Aaron B, welcome back, my friend. Great to see ya. Back with ya. But we had some more stuff I wanted to throw that Kimber actually threw at me for that case. And there's another case that Molly had brought to my attention the other night when we were covering it. They kind of like it. It's pretty wild. And more corruption, police brutality, stuff like that. We're going to be talking about that out of Mississippi in the Jackson City Police Department as well. I got you, Lisa. I got you. Yeah, they're going to be keeping me in check here so I can be out of here at a normal time and get to bed and wake up in the morning. Welcome back, Naomi. Good to see you tonight. Excuse me. I appreciate you. So, let's see what we got here. Going back to some of what has been going on, or what went on with that Tyree Nichols case. More crazy stuff. And this is how I know this next thing we're going to look at with Tyree's case, this is how I know that this was done on purpose, and that I think that it could have been a targeted situation because of what we were talking about the other night about the fact that it was believed that Tyree may have been involved with one of the Memphis officers' ex-girlfriends or something like that. That's kind of a thing. So hold on a minute here. Okay. All right. All right. All right. So as this article reads, guys, after Tyree Nichols' fatal beating, Memphis officer texted photo of bloodied man to ex-girlfriend. She testifies. We saw in the video the video was pointing downward at this, where they took a picture of him. They sat him up against the car. Pretty disgusting stuff, but very, very true. So, all right, give me a minute here.
Taking place in that federal trial of three former Memphis police. Opening statements are taking place in that federal. Federal trial of three former Memphis police officers charged in the death of Tyree Nichols in January of 2023. Now, graphic body cam video from the scene, which we are not showing you now, appears to show officers beating Nichols despite his calls for help. The footage release renewed calls for police reform nationwide. Nichols died 3 days later in the hospital from injuries he sustained. The former officers pleaded not guilty to depriving Nichols of his rights through excessive force, failure to intervene, and witness tampering. Let's bring in CBS News correspondent Elise Preston.
There were 6 officers that were charged in total. Welcome, Dane. But 3 of them pled not guilty. That's what this is, the separation of. The rest of them, it was a different scenario. But yeah, 3 of them pled not guilty and are trying to fight this with an attorney. So we'll see. I can agree. Well, it was definitely, in my opinion, I do believe that this was targeted. And I'm going to tell you, if we do have any video that goes up, there's going to be a trigger warning because it's very, very graphic in some ways. So
she's in Memphis, Tennessee. She's following all of this. And Elise, I understand the jury was
welcome,
officially
Norma.
seated Tuesday. What more do we know about them, these 12 individuals who will ultimately decide the fate in this case?
Well, Errol, that was a surprise seating. I can tell you, people were expecting jury selection to take place for up to 5 days here in Memphis because so many people were aware of the case and so many people had knowledge of those officers. But they were able to seat that jury within 2 days. It is very representative of this Memphis community. 16 people were chosen. They're expected to serve for the next 3 to 4 weeks, which is the anticipated length of the trial. Now, 12 of those 16 will be the immediate jurors, and then you have 4 alternates. And then it's very mixed once you look at that group. 8 women, 8 men of various of various races and various ages, Errol.
And what are we hearing from opening statements? I'm not sure if they're underway already. So if not, what do we expect or what has been said already?
Well, court is in recess right now, but yes, opening statements kicked off about an hour ago. And so far, they are very vivid. Sometimes when you're listening to court proceedings, they're not as graphic with these opening statements that we have been hearing so far. And I think that's largely in part to this graphic video that you had mentioned that we are not showing at the time. Now, the prosecutors, they walk through what jurors are going to hear in their case. Now, keep in mind the 3 officers who are charged, this is a federal trial. So they're facing civil rights violations, and they're also facing violations related to what the prosecution is saying that they tried to cover up. They tried to conspire what happened that night of January 7th, 2023. So the prosecutor walked jurors through what they're going to see on that very graphic video. Again, that video was not shown to the jurors just yet. Many of them have possibly already seen the video, but just walking through that video, just hearing the prosecutor describe it, it is tough going through that beating, going through what Tyre Nichols endured the night of January 7th, those repeated kicks, the repeated punches, and then dying 3 days later. The prosecutor also mentioned that we will hear from 2 officers who were seen on that tape. Emmett Martin and Desmond Mills, they've already pleaded guilty. They are set to testify during this trial, Errol.
And that will be important for the jury to hear. Elise Preston, across all of it, thank you so much.
Here we are driving down the road, and all of a sudden, bang! Oh!
So 2 of those officers pled guilty, and I believe they're going to be, my understanding is, and I could be wrong, and if I am, my apologies, but I believe that they're possibly going to be testifying against these other officers, okay? That's going to be hard, okay? That's what I think the plea agreement was, which is what they're probably doing at this point. Welcome, Brutally. Good to see you again tonight. They also, just so you guys that are just not familiar with this, there was EMS workers, rescue workers, whatever you want to call it, that showed up, and they refused the EMS workers for them to treat. They refused for them, the officers refused for EMS workers to treat Tyre whatsoever. They wouldn't let him touch him. So it's pretty crazy to me. Welcome back, Doodle, to the sauce. And thank you for that very much. Let me see here. And Doodle gifted a membership to, looks like Combat Vet received it. Congrats, Combat Vet. Welcome back to the sauce. Thank you for that, Doodle. God bless. Absolutely. That was very nice. Very kind of you, Doodle. And welcome back to the sauce. I know you're not going to let that go. So, wait, you gifted more than one. Well, damn. You gifted 2. Hold up. You gifted 3. What is going on here? Hold on a minute. Let's see who got these. Lisa Vallejo was gifted a membership from Doodle. Mystery got gifted a membership. That's awesome. And Combat Vet. Thank you so much, Doodlebug. That's awesome. God bless. We got 4 meatballs. Doodle just renewed, but 4 new meatballs tonight. That is very awesome. Very, very awesome. Thank you again, Doodle. God bless. And welcome to the sauce, meatballs. It should be illegal, but they refused. They told them, do not touch him. Do not treat him. Out of some fear, they didn't. That's insane to me. And I believe they're going to be charged for that as well. I don't care. I worked in fire and EMS for years. Okay. as a firefighter and first responder, EMS worker, all of that stuff, guys. I don't care who they were. Yes, she is. Welcome, Captain Jenks. Good to see you. I'd have never refused. I just don't understand how you can do that. I just don't get it. Never will, never have, never could. I don't understand it. So unbelievable stuff, you guys. Unbelievable. All right, let me see here now. 33 peeps in here. Please make sure to hit that that like button, guys, as you come through that door. Please, please, please. Excuse me. Yeah, that way we can try to get this up into that algorithm, guys. Hold on a minute here. Why not? I'm going to show you a little something here. Thank you so much, Brutally. God bless. Absolutely, Blue Eyes. Thank you. And you are part of that community, so we appreciate you so very much. Let's check this.
Talking about a Scorpion team going in a different direction, even being hostile to citizens. That's how one of the officers charged in the Tyre Nichols beating described the police unit.
Desmond Mills broke down crying on the witness stand in the trial of former officers Tadarius Bean, Justin Smith, and Demetrius Haley.
Our April Thompson was in the courtroom and has today's testimony.
Some predicted these officers would turn on each other, and Desmond Mills did as much today, describing the Scorpion unit as one he was trying to get out of. Desmond Mills, with his face covered, entering federal court Tuesday to testify in the trial of Tadarius Bean, Justin Smith, and Demetrius Haley. Mills took a plea deal in the federal charges and agreed to testify for the prosecution. But in court, Mills broke down, sobbing on the witness stand after looking at the video of all of them hitting Tyre Nichols. Mills saying, "I wish I could have stopped the punches. It hurt to watch. It hurt inside so much. I feel bad every time a picture is on the screen, and no, I'm a part of that." Mills described a Scorpion team that was going in a different direction, saying he didn't like the team and was looking to leave, saying the team was go, 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 and not stopping to think. Some had predicted the officers charged would turn on each other. An attorney for Tyre Nichols' family told WREG as much before the trial started.
They either going to try to point fingers and say it was mostly them, not me, which is them turning on each other, or they are going to have to say we were following our training. We were following our policy. And on the witness stand, Desmond Mills described his co-Scorpion team members, saying Demetrius Haley came to work pumped and was aggressive to citizens. He said Haley frequently did not have his camera on, and when he asked him about it, he said, "F that." Haley said Emmett Martin wasn't doing well after a car accident, and there was something mentally wrong. He said Haley and Martin were called the Smash Brothers because of their use of force, saying they would get hostile with citizens. Mills said he pepper sprayed Tyre Nichols even though he was not a threat. And after Mills pepper sprayed himself, he got angry and pulled out his baton, hitting Nichols 3 times. He admitted he did nothing to help Nichols and never knew there was a Skycop camera recording what they did. He found that out when he got back to the station. In tears, Mills said, "I made his child fatherless. I am sorry. I am sorry. Knowing sorry can't bring him back. I pray his child has everything he needs growing up." Court wrapped up early this afternoon.
The Scorpion team was a specialized team that worked for the police department. It's hard to explain what it was, but it was kind of like a task force that set out, in my opinion, to harass certain types of people and ensure, welcome Heather Fitzgerald, good to see you, and to ensure that, I don't even know how to explain it. Yes, Paula, Mills was part of the 6 officers that were involved. Toby, it's hard to explain, but I think what they were supposed to be was like a streets team, like a, you know, like a gang unit or something like that. And it went way out of hand, in my opinion. Good to see you, Truth Seeker. I don't care what this guy says. Cry. You can cry all you want. You're crying now because you're caught. That's my opinion. That's how I feel about it. Special unit. Thank you, Dane. And that's the only reason why I think he's crying, because he knows he's caught. And he knows what he did. And now he's trying to make it so he gets in less trouble, in my opinion. That's all.
Noon around 4 o'clock. No explanation.
And that's exactly what it is, Heather. They're like, they were like thugs. It was like a gang initiation that night, the way it looked in those videos. It was disgusting.
Why? Desmond Mills is expected back on the stand Wednesday morning. For your news leader in downtown Memphis, April Thompson, WREG News Channel 3.
More than 2 weeks later, hopefully inching closer to a verdict.
Hang on, folks. Oh, yeah, here we go. Hold on a minute. This is another part of this I thought was quite interesting. It's great to see you, Heather. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Expected to return to the stand today in the trial of.
Yeah, the Scorpion unit was disbanded almost immediately after this happened because they knew they were done. So yeah, that has been disbanded, thank God. And there has been nothing else like that put out there. So good.
3 former Memphis police officers charged in the fatal beating of Tyre Nichols. Yesterday, the first responder testified he knew it was a medical emergency as soon as he saw Nichols, but that officers never told him Nichols had been beaten, which may have delayed effective medical care. Jurors also heard from a former officer who struck a plea deal in the case. Emmett Martin testified he beat a helpless Nichols and then lied about it to internal investigators to try to cover up what he did. He also said he never saw Nichols reach for Martin's gun or swing at officers, as police reports claimed. ABC's Phil Lipoff joins me now for more on this. Phil, what stood out to you from the witness testimony so far in this case?
Well, what you just said was huge. I mean, there were 5 officers involved in this Scorpion unit that were there that night, involved in the beating of Tyre Nichols. 2 of them have flipped and are giving testimony against 3 of them. 2 of them have cut plea deals with the feds. One of them was on the stand for the past couple of days, giving that really damning testimony. And then there was this testimony of a text that was sent by one of the officers on trial to his girlfriend of a bloodied Tyre Nichols lying there with his hands tied behind his back. That was texted. There's been a lot of really damning testimony so far. And it's really hard to hear, too.
And this ex-officer, Emmett Martin, not only testified that he beat Nichols while he was helpless, but also that he exaggerated Nichols' actions that prompted this traffic stop
in the first
to begin with. Now, I can't remember a cop ever giving this kind of testimony in a case like this. Based on the cross-examination, how is the defense trying to counter this testimony? They seem to really focus on handcuffs and their potential to be a deadly weapon if only one hand is cuffed. Is that going to be enough?
Right. There's a lot of splitting hairs. But in the end, this officer who has cut a deal has said, we exaggerated what we did to pull him over in the first place. And then he didn't reach for the gun.
There it is, you guys. They exaggerated what they did, what he did, and what they did to pull him over in the first place, which means it never happened. There was nothing. Like we all figured, there was no reason for this man to be pulled over. None. Now I wonder why. Now I wonder why, if it was really truly what that rumor out there was about, that there was something to do with an ex-girlfriend or something. I gotta wonder now. This is like really, really sickening to me.
Gun, like we said, he reached for the gun. So, but the only way.
And that was the other side of it. They said that he reached for a gun, which he never did, which is why they started beating on him. Lies, lies, more lies.
They could counter this is what they did in cross-examination and said, well, aren't you just making all of this up or saying this for your plea deal? You cut a plea deal, so you have to give this kind of testimony for the prosecution.
And then now we have this testimony from the paramedic who responded to the scene. He's saying that when he got there, nobody told him that Nichols had been beaten, that the officer said they thought Nichols took something, so he's administering Narcan, treating a different set of injuries. How damning is that testimony, and what do you expect from cross-examination today?
Look, it was bad enough that the officer has said, this is what the one who cut a deal said, this is what we've done, right? And this is what we could have done. Now you have Jesse Guy, this paramedic who's on the stand today, was on the stand yesterday saying, I got there and I wasn't given crucial information from the police officers or 2 other paramedics, by the way, who have been fired as well, who were there before EMT Jesse Guy got there. And when asked if you had that information, would it made a difference? He said yes. Remember, he performed CPR on Nichols in the ambulance on the way to the hospital and wasn't able to save his life.
All right, Phil Lipoff, thank you.
Well, now. Wow. This is worse than I thought it was. Let's see here.
And then he was reincarnated as another dog every single time. So eventually.
1 second, folks.
Just as another dog. The dog's name is Bailey.
All right, guys, check this out here. This is basically to state that there proof that there was no reason to pull him over. That's what this video is supposed to show.
Well, we start tonight with breaking news. The city of Memphis releasing 43 videos and more than 20 hours of new footage of Tyre Nichols' deadly encounter with former members of the Memphis Police Department's Scorpion Unit. Thanks for joining us at 6. I'm Richard Ransom.
And I'm Pepper Baker. Now, while the new footage shines a little more light on what happened 1 year ago, it also raises more questions about this monumental case.
We'll get analysis from experts here in the studio with us shortly. But first, ABC 24's Stephen Pimpo breaks down what he discovered today. Stephen?
Richard, Pepper, one of the main themes we continue to come up against while reviewing this footage revolves.
Kermit the Frog is real, folks. I did not think he was. I thought he was a Muppet, but I'll be damned if this guy don't sound just like him.
Around the ex-Memphis police officers involved in Tyre Nichols' death contradicting each other on camera, especially when it comes to why they pulled him over and the degree to which Nichols allegedly resisted arrest.
He started fighting with us and took off, and he got pepper sprayed and took off running. They did catch him. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Not Tyre.
This interaction between Tyre Nichols' mother, Rovon Wells, and former Memphis police officer Preston Hemphill is just some of the newly released footage from the night of her son's death after a traffic stop by the now disbanded MPD Scorpion Unit. MPD has said Nichols was initially pulled over for reckless driving. But here's what new body camera footage shows.
What was the original stop for? PC, then evading the...
Well, you can't do evading in a vehicle, because then that means it was...
Former officer Demetrius Haley had a different answer.
Yeah, he was drove into oncoming traffic. So we tried to, I'm talking about, he literally, yes, all this traffic. I'm talking, so we tried to get him stopped.
This is one of the calls into dispatch from officers pursuing Nichols.
Okay, you have any charges on him?
There's no answer. Haley also claims Nichols tried to attack him and tried to grab another officer's gun.
Took a swing, grabbed Martin, tried to grab Martin's gun. He had a whole grip on him. I'm talking about he grabbed him, I still like this.
But this is how Officer Hemphill described his interaction with Nichols.
Dude was very polite while resisting. I'll give him credit.
What was he saying?
We're telling him, get on the ground. Okay, officers, I'm getting on the ground. Okay, officers, whatever you say, and not doing it. He was politely resisting.
But it still cost Nichols his life. Now, the only reason this latest Tyre Nichols-related video was released is because a media coalition sued for
We all
its
heard
release
this and we
last
all know the
March,
truth.
granting
That was
public
bullshit.
access to the court's gag order in the criminal case against the 5 now former MPD officers. This new video comes out 1 year and 3 days after the city released the initial video footage. Richard Pepper.
All right, thank you, Stephen.
Hang on, guys. There were 2 sheriff's deputies, not just the Memphis police, but there were 2 sheriff's deputies involved in this as well. Here it is. There's a lot of people that should not have known better. I didn't get to show you guys this the last time. The full involvement of everybody that was involved. So these 2 deputies showed up at this scene, probably got a phone call from one of these guys. This is like a gang, guys. It's like a gang of people that showed up to beat on this guy, to watch the beating of this guy. These are all law enforcement officers. This is disgusting to me. This is even worse, that these 2 deputies, this was not even their patrol area. They just showed up to watch. Are you kidding me? This is disgusting. Sickening and disgusting.
Agencies fired personnel who responded. SCSO opted to suspend their deputies for 5 days.
They've been good officers here at the sheriff's office. They had no prior discipline. That was taken into account. I'm sure they're sorry that they showed up, and hopefully this will be a learning moment for them.
Reporting in Memphis, Jordan James, WREG, News Channel 3.
Only the 5 former MPD officers are facing criminal charges. Sheriff Bonner says his deputies are not expected to be charged criminally, and they're talking with the DA's office.
This just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. I'm starting to see that, Blue Eyes. It's starting to look like this was 100% premeditated. 100% premeditated. It's disgusting. I'm trying to find the trial, guys. I don't know if I'm going to be able to show it ever because I think it's gagged and therefore they're not going to show it. I don't know. But this brings the question. I have some more stuff to show you like this. It's a lot like this. This just makes me sick. Okay, I'm going to show you guys that as well. Okay, hold on here a minute. That's kind of what I heard as well. Welcome, Debbie. Good to see you tonight. I heard that too, Miss Sherry, and I got to wonder if that was the photograph that was sent. This is what happens when you mess with one of our women or something stupid like that. They took a picture of him after he was beat to death and sent it to the ex-girlfriend. What the hell? That tells me it was premeditated. They did it. They targeted the situation and did it for a reason. Sickening shit. Completely. It makes me completely sick to even think about it. All right. So hold on here.
According to court documents.
All right, so we have another situation here out of Mississippi in the Jackson Police Department that I wanted to show you. Okay.
According to court documents, McAlpin, formerly the department's chief investigator, received a complaint from one of his neighbors in Braxton, a village of less than 200 people in neighboring Simpson County, about several black men staying at the home of a white woman. The neighbor, who according to court documents observed suspicious behavior by the men, did not know that Parker was helping to care for the woman. McAlpin directed Dedmond, an RCSO investigator, to handle the complaint. Court records and plea hearings revealed that on January 24, 2023, Dedmond sent a group message to his colleagues Middleton, L.
Hold on. I forgot. I got to play this other one first. I'm sorry, guys. 1 minute. My apologies. Okay. So sorry about that. Oh, yeah. I absolutely feel that this was completely premeditated. I think they set him up. They stated that they over-exaggerated the issue to pull him over, too. Okay. Is this a video, Molly, or is this... Hold on here. Yeah, I agree, Truth Seeker. Okay, so here we go. Oh, I guess this is not the thing. Where did it go? I thought this was the actual video, Molly. I'm sorry. All right, so then I guess we will go back to the other one. I had this confused. Please bear with me, guys. I'm so sorry. Confused myself. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? There it is. Okay, back to this one then.
According to court documents, McAlpin, former...
Good night, Zelda. Have a good night, hon. Thank you so much for joining us today. All right, let's start this again. Sorry, guys.
According to court documents, McAlpin, formerly the department's chief investigator, received a complaint from one of his neighbors in Braxton, a village of less than 200 people in neighboring Simpson County, about several black men staying at the home of a white woman. The neighbor, who according to court documents observed suspicious behavior by the men, did not know that Parker was helping to care for the woman. McAlpin directed Dedmond, an RCSO investigator, to handle the complaint. Court records and plea hearings revealed that on January 24, 2023, Dedmond sent a group message to his colleagues Middleton, Elward, and Opdyke, all members of the Goon Squad. This message detailed a plan to violently enter a residence in Braxton, Rankin County, Mississippi, where two black men, MJ and EP, were living. The Goon Squad is notorious for its excessive use of force and failure to report such actions. Dedmon cautioned his team about the possibility of surveillance cameras at the location and instructed them to avoid bad mugshots, implying that they should use excessive force while ensuring their actions did not leave any visible marks that could be captured in photographs. Upon their arrival, the defendants forcefully kicked in the door and entered the home without a warrant or any urgent need. They unlawfully handcuffed and arrested the men without any probable cause, hurled racial slurs at them, and warned them to stay out of Rankin County. In a threatening display, Dedmon discharged his firearm twice to intimidate the victims. The assault escalated as the defendants punched and kicked the men, used a taser on them 17 times, held them down while pouring liquids on their faces to make them ingest it involuntarily, threw eggs at them, and assaulted them with a dildo that an officer mounted to a BB gun that was found in the home. McAlpin, the senior officer present, failed to intervene during this brutal treatment and even stole property from the home while the assault was ongoing. At the end of this harrowing ordeal, Elward secretly removed a bullet from his gun, forced it into MJ's mouth, and pulled the trigger. The gun clicked without firing, prompting Elward to chamber another round with the intent to dry fire a second time. However, the gun discharged and struck MJ. Causing severe injuries, it lacerated his tongue, fractured his jaw, and exited through his neck. While MJ lay bleeding on the floor, the defendants neglected to provide any medical assistance. Instead, they regrouped outside to formulate a false narrative about the incident. They undertook numerous actions to fabricate evidence, including planting a BB gun on MJ, destroying surveillance videos, discarding shell casings and taser cartridges, submitting fraudulent drug evidence to the crime lab, filing false reports, wrongfully charging MJ with crimes he did not commit, lying to investigators, and coercing witnesses to adhere to their cover story. For several of the defendants, this was not their first instance of misconduct against residents of Rankin County. In a separate incident on December 4, 2022, Dedmon assaulted a white man by beating and tasing him, and even discharged a firearm near his head to extract a confession, all while Elward and Opdyke stood by and did nothing. Dedmon also sexually assaulted this victim. As a result of the December 4 incident, Dedmon, Elward, and Opdyke each pleaded guilty to additional federal felony offenses, including deprivation of rights under the color of law and firearm discharge in connection with a violent crime. These 6 officers pled guilty to a total of 13 felony charges, which encompass serious offenses including conspiracy to violate civil rights, unlawful deprivation of rights, discharging a firearm during the commission of a violent crime, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and obstructing justice. The court records and information from plea hearings reveal alarming details about their actions. A number of brutality accusations against the Rankin County Sheriff's Office since 2004, verifying 17 of them involving 22 victims, with 20 deputies present at one or more incident. Accusations against the department included ramming a stick down a man's throat until he vomited blood, choking a man with a lamp cord and waterboarding him, jabbing an off-duty sheriff's deputy for a neighboring county in the buttocks with a flashlight, testing new tasers by shocking a man in the head and genitals, using a blowtorch to melt a nutcracker handle onto a man's bare leg before choking him with a belt, and dragging a blowtorch flame across a suspect's feet. Several people reported being stunned, having guns put in their mouths, waterboarded, and being told to move out of the county. The Goon Squad also made commemorative coins about the squad, one reading Lieutenant Middleton's goon squad. Christian Dedman was sentenced to 40 to 25 years. Brett McAlpin was sentenced to 27 to 20 years. Hunter Elward was sentenced to 20 to 45 years. Jeffrey Middleton was sentenced to 17.5 to 20 years. Daniel Opdyke was sentenced to 17 to 20 years. And Joshua Hartfield was sentenced to 10 to 15 years. When searched, it was found that the Rankin County Sheriff's Department is not in compliance with the nationwide, public-facing platform of record. The Brady List, or Supreme Court of the United States Brady Doctrine, U.S. Freedom of Information Act 5, U.S.C. Section 552, Mississippi Public Records Act, Code Ann, 25-61-1, Open Government Act S. 248, Open Government Initiative, and the Open Government Directives, 2009, issued by the United States Department of Justice.
Wow. That wasn't even police brutality. That's fucking torture, you guys. I've never heard of anything like this in my life. This is insanity, you guys. Complete and total insanity. How do these people get badges? I don't understand this. Good God Almighty. Unbelievable. To sexually abuse the man? Shoved a stick down somebody's throat till he threw up blood. What the hell? Racially charged assault. It wasn't that long ago. Okay, so this is more on this has gone above and beyond anything I could ever imagine. This is more on these 6 Mississippi officers.
Troubling story out of Mississippi involving 6 law enforcement officers convicted in a brutal racist assault. They called themselves the Goon Squad, and 2 of them were sentenced yesterday. The attack began when someone called to complain about 2 black men staying with a white woman. Errol Barnett has been following this case, and we want to warn you that some of the details are very disturbing.
We wanted justice, and we have some justice.
Michael Jenkins and Eddie Parker say they are satisfied after a federal judge sentenced former sheriff deputies Hunter Elward to 20 years and Jeffrey Middleton to 17 years for crimes the judge called egregious and despicable.
As far as the torture session, it went down, mainly in here.
A so-called goon squad of 6 officers pleaded guilty to crimes including entering this home last year without a search warrant. There, they shot Jenkins and Parker with stun guns, sexually assaulted them, and poured alcohol and milk over them while shouting racial slurs.
The 6 white police officers involved in this assault sought to dehumanize their victims.
Elwood admitted to shooting Jenkins after putting a gun in his mouth during a mock execution.
Looking at me, I'm looking at him, and he sat there for a minute, and he pulled the trigger.
In the courtroom Tuesday, Elwood apologized directly to the 2 men. Parker then forgave the ex-officer.
I forgive that part, but other than that, he still did, what he did, and he has to be punished for it.
An investigation by the Associated Press revealed that since 2019, some of the deputies had been involved in at least 4 violent assaults on black men, which resulted in 2 deaths and another
It's 11:22, you guys. Sorry. Never fails. Every time. Jesus. Sorry, guys.
Following this case, and we want to warn you.
Judge called egregious and despicable.
As far as the torture session, it went down, mainly in here.
A so-called goon squad of 6 officers pleaded guilty to crimes including entering this home last year without a search warrant. There, they shocked Jenkins and Parker with stun guns, sexually assaulted them, and poured alcohol and milk over them while shouting racial slurs.
The 6 white police officers involved in this assault sought to dehumanize their victims.
Elwood admitted to shooting Jenkins after putting a gun in his mouth during a mock execution.
Look at me, I'm looking at him, and you sat there for a minute, and you pulled the trigger.
In the courtroom Tuesday, Elwood apologized directly to the 2 men. Parker then forgave the ex-officer.
I forgive that part, but other than that, he still did, what he did, and he has to be punished for it.
An investigation by the Associated Press revealed that since 2019, some of the deputies had been involved in at least 4 violent assaults on Black men, which resulted in 2 deaths and another suffering lasting injuries.
What do you say to people of color in Rankin County who look at this case and wonder if they're safe?
Well, I think that the people of color in Rankin County are safer than they were this time last year.
Now, later today and throughout the week, the other 4 officers involved in this racist torture incident will be sentenced. They face anywhere from 5 to 30 years in prison. But lawyers representing the victims say that's not enough. They've called for the ouster of Rankin County Sheriff Brian Bailey, and they filed a $400 million lawsuit against him for overseeing this team. His legal team says that lawsuit should be dismissed. Tony?
Errol, thank you very much.
Buddy, do you see her?
Yeah, she's as slow as all their ships.
Then sink and destroy.
We don't need to hunt for anything. She's in plain sight. We'll make it home for Independence Day.
Action stations.
I've never heard, I'm completely appalled. I've never heard of shit like wow. This is insanity to me, you guys. It almost makes you lose faith in humanity, knowing that this is what law enforcement has become. I don't even understand. I don't, honestly. I've never heard anything like this ever.
As of today, 4 of the 6 involved in those torture crimes have been sentenced, including Updike, the person who turned over the text messages from the Goon Squad group chat, along with Dedman, who was identified in court today as the ringleader. 4th former Rankin County deputy who pleaded guilty to torturing Eddie Parker and Michael Jenkins was sentenced to 40 years in prison Wednesday as accounts of the horrific brutality of Goon Squad deputies afflicted the federal courtroom.
Let this be a strict warning to all rogue police officers in the United States of America that you will not get light sentences, that you will not be let off easy.
U.S. District Court Judge Tom Lee.
Exactly, Paula. The biggest problem with this whole thing, they didn't even need to be at that house. There was not a police call there. There was no reason that the police were called. A neighbor complained about seeing Black men. That's why they went there. And this is premeditated. 100%. This is unbelievable, you guys. Unbelievable.
Imposed the harshest sentence so far on ex-deputy Christian Dedman, saying he committed the most shocking, brutal, and cruel acts imaginable. Details of the nightmare beatings, torture, and sexual assaults back in January of 2023 unfolded for a second day as the victims came face to face with their abusers. For the first time this week, Eddie Parker spoke before the judge, giving his impact statement at Dedman's hearing.
Christian Dedman, who Eddie described as the devil. And to see the devil get his due on this day, we just have to say all glory to God.
Despite his relatively young age, Dedmon, while on stand, claimed that he was only able to rise to this position because he participated in this behavior, saying it was encouraged by management.
The only way that Mr. Dedmon was promoted, the only way that he was able to become an investigator at the age of 28 and have authority over other people was because he bought into the culture of violence.
Dedmon was also sentenced in the same proceeding of a crime related to a separate incident in December of 2022. Updike, the third former deputy, received a 17-year prison term Wednesday. At his sentencing, Updike's attorney pointed to Dedmon as the, quote, guy who had this demented sexual perversion. Two other deputies, Elward and Middleton, learned their fates on Tuesday. Elward, who shot Jenkins in the mouth, was sentenced to 20 years. Middleton was sentenced to 17 and a half.
I've lived in Mississippi 68 years, and I've never seen justice like this.
Melvin Jenkins, the father of one victim, thanked Judge Lee, saying that the sentence was unheard of in the state. The final two defendants, Hartfield and McAlpin, are set to be sentenced Thursday. In addition to their federal charges, the 6 defendants also face state charges for which they await sentencing. Now, we have reached out to Rankin County Sheriff Brian Bailey following those statements that were made about management today in court. He says that he plans to release a statement sometime tomorrow. Live in Jackson, Madeline Nolan, 16 WAPT News.
I think that this is where they got more time from the state, which is good. I hope they did. It is, Bling. I truly agree with you.
The deputies who tortured him, killed him, but he didn't die. The victims say they were beaten, tased, sexually assaulted, and subjected to racial slurs after the law enforcement officers accused them of dating white women.
And these are the longest and strongest sentences in United States history for any police officers.
Judgment day for the Goon Squad. 5 disgraced former Rankin County deputies and an ex-Richland police officer sentenced to additional prison time after a judge rejected state prosecutors' recommendation to give the men less time behind bars for abusing 2 black men.
Been a long year, man, but it's been a short year. I'm thankful for all y'all, that's been here with us, man, for the ride. All y'all that helped us, with this fight.
Victims Eddie Parker and Michael Jenkins speaking out after the judge handed down the sentences.
It really ain't been about me. It's been about what they did to my mom, how they made her feel, and just the dictating and the bullying.
Sentences for Joshua Hartfield, Brett McAlpin, Jeffrey Middleton, Daniel Updike, and Christian Dedmon ranged from 15 years to 25 years. Hunter Elward, who shot Jenkins in the mouth, was given a 45-year prison sentence. Jenkins and Parker's attorney called the judge's ruling historic.
No police officer in the history of Rankin County has ever been held criminally responsible for harming anyone, let alone a black person.
The 6 men are already serving between 17 and a half years to 40 years in prison on federal charges. They will serve the state charges concurrent with the federal sentence. Prosecutors say in January 2023, the deputies handcuffed Jenkins and Parker in their Braxton home, then tased, beat, sexually assaulted, and subjected the men to racial slurs after the law officers accused them of dating white women. While the deputies are headed to prison, the fight for justice in Rankin County isn't over.
Brian Bailey should be on notice that he may be next.
The Rankin County NAACP still demanding Sheriff Brian Bailey resign and for the U.S. Justice Department to prosecute Bailey.
The sheriff, who we consider the leader of the Goon Squad.
That's right.
So we are going to continue our fight to remove him from office.
Now, the sheriff has said he was in the dark and wasn't aware of what the Goon Squad was up to. Rankin County facing a $400
I'm gonna call bullshit. I guarantee you he probably knew exactly what they were doing and probably sent them there.
$100 million civil lawsuit. The victim's lawyers say a court judgment against the county could bankrupt Rankin County. Back to you.
That's right. Today's hearings capped the very emotional past 3 days in federal court. But now the 6 former law enforcement members have all been sentenced. All of them combined will serve more than 130 years behind bars.
Justice is being enacted in Mississippi.
Joshua Hartfield, the last of 6 Mississippi law enforcement officers, was sentenced Thursday in the torture of 2 black men in January of 2023. He received a 10-year prison term. Of the day's sentencings, Brett McAlpin, the highest-ranking officer on scene that night, was sentenced to more than 27 years.
I think for Mr. McAlpin to be sentenced to more time than the actual person who shot Mr. Jenkins, I fought against that, but unfortunately, you respect the court's rulings when they make a ruling.
As a former Richland police officer, Hartfield was the only defendant who was not a member of the Rankin County Sheriff's Office. According to prosecutors, Hartfield tased the men while they were handcuffed. He also tried to dispose of evidence in the case. His attorneys argued for a lesser sentence, but prosecutors told the court he wanted to work for the sheriff's department and applied to work there.
We were waiting on this for years and ages, and here's a new day. I hope.
Prosecutors described McAlpin, a former deputy, as the one calling the shots and as Mafia Don. Eddie Parker, a victim, during his impact statement, told the court that he's been waiting to come face to face with McAlpin.
The night of January 24th, sympathy was only in me and Michael's eyes. Sympathy was the only thing we wanted. Sympathy is what we did not get.
Through the hearing, McAlpin made no eye contact with the victims, but during that night in Braxton, Parker says that he watched the defendant, quote, walk around that house like he was the man. It was also made clear that McAlpin, who lived in the same neighborhood where Parker and Michael Jenkins were tortured, made the initial call to another officer.
Well, I'm so thankful again for Judge Lee. And like I said in there, you can tell he's not a part of the good old boy clan. He for justice.
4 other deputies learned their fates on Tuesday and Wednesday. The harshest sentence given to Dedmon, described as the ringleader in the courtroom. He will serve 40 years. Elward, who shot Jenkins, will serve 20 years, and both Updike and Middleton will serve 17 and a half years behind bars.
Never in the history of the United States of America have 6 police officers been given out sentences for harming anyone.
That is absolutely awesome. I am super happy to see that. That's justice, folks. That is true justice. Absolute justice, in my opinion. Let me see something here, guys. All right, guys, we're gonna check this out. That'll probably be it for the night. Oh wow, this story, it all goes together in a conglomerate of disgusting stuff. So I'll just say that much. And it actually has happened. Obviously, it's hard to believe that these things happen, that they could happen. When you look at law enforcement officers and hear that they do these things, it just doesn't process. Like how did you do this? You know what I'm saying? I don't understand this. So let's check this one out. This is in regards to a gentleman named Rodney Reed. I see brutality, threw that in here. And this was brought up way earlier today, so I figured what the hell, it fits into it. Let's talk about it tonight. So,
Bastrop County Sheriff says they found the body of a woman along the dirt road of 1441. Now, let me tell you, this morning, 19-year-old Stacy Lee Stites was reported missing and never arrived at work.
But my personal opinion when I heard that she had been killed was that Fennell had done it immediately. And I know a number of people around here that felt the same way.
just so you guys don't get confused, we talked about Marcellus Williams this morning, who was put to death this evening at 6 p.m. on death row. A lot of people believe he was an innocent man. He didn't have to be put to death, but he was. Okay. This story goes in part with that story and some of these other situations too. So here we go.
And I believe the state knew about it. I believe the district attorney for Bastrop knew about it. I believe the sheriff's department knew about it. And I believe the Bastrop police department knew about it. And I do believe they covered that up. They did not want a fellow officer implicated.
A Georgetown police sergeant is spending the night behind bars. Jimmy Fennell Jr. is accused of sexually assaulting a woman he detained.
He put me back into the patrol car and told me that if I ever told anybody that when he got out of prison, he would hunt me down and he would kill me.
Did Roberto Bayardo make missteps that hindered justice in some of the most high-profile crimes? A man within days of execution now awaiting word of an appeal after Bayardo clarified his conclusions on when that woman died.
Maria Bryant Fountain spoke with Fox 7 about the murder of her husband, Giddings police officer Gary Joe Bryant. He was gunned down on the job in 1996.
My brother said Joe was working the other end in Giddings. Joe just knew as much or more than my brother did. And I think that's what happened to Joe.
The man who oversaw the Reed investigation, Bastrop Sheriff Richard Hernandez, who also turned out to be a dirty cop and pled guilty to 6 felonies.
There's a possibility that the police, they had him killed.
The little clique with David Hall, Nathan Lapham, Jimmy Fennell, and sometimes he gave his voice as he worked there also.
And he walked by and he said, Jimmy Fennell killed Stacy Stites. And I was like, yeah.
I believe every man has a conscience, and sooner or later it will get the best of him and someone will come forward.
Bastrop County Sheriff says they found the body of a woman along the dirt road of 1441. Now, let me tell you, this morning, 19-year-old Stacy Lee Stites was reported missing and never arrived at work.
In 2006, a small documentary film team helped expose how an innocent man ended up on Texas's death row.
But my personal opinion when I heard that she had been killed was that Fennell had done it immediately. And I know a number of people around here that felt the same way.
It soon became apparent that the case against Rodney Reed was not just a small town affair.
And I believe the state knew about it. I believe the district attorney for Bastrop knew about it. I believe the sheriff's department knew about it. And I believe the Bastrop police department knew about it. And I do believe they covered that up. They did not want a fellow officer implicated.
In the past 13 years, the evidence has continued to mount in favor of Rodney Reed's innocence.
A Georgetown police sergeant is spending the night behind bars. Jimmy Fennell Jr. is accused of sexually assaulting a woman he detained.
His guilty pleas today could play a major role in the appeal process of convicted murderer Rodney Reed.
Key witnesses have recanted crucial testimony.
Did Roberto Bayardo make missteps that hinder justice in some of the most high-profile crimes. A man within days of execution now awaiting word of an appeal after Bayardo clarified his conclusions on when that woman died.
Key law enforcement officials who oversaw the initial investigation have been charged and convicted for their own misconduct.
The man who oversaw the Reed investigation, Bastrop Sheriff Richard Hernandez, who also turned out to be a dirty cop and pled guilty to 6 felonies.
And critical scientific medical evidence has been discovered that essentially exonerates Rodney Reed.
She had been face down for 5 or more hours in one position before she was turned over to the new position. And she was dead around midnight. She was already dead.
Yet instead of exonerating Reed or even retrying him under fair conditions, the Texas courts have decided to set a November 20th execution date for this year.
State prosecutors are now asking to execute convicted murderer Rodney Reed.
The amount of injustice wrought against Rodney Reed in this case is impossible to measure, and the fact that the state continues to seek his execution defies common sense and human decency. This documentary series is intended to highlight the evidence and the witnesses that prove Rodney's innocence, in hopes that Texas halts the execution of this innocent man. On the morning of May 6, 1998, Dr. Roberto Bayardo, Travis County, Texas medical examiner, told a lie. He was testifying during the trial of Rodney Reed for the capital murder of a local 19-year-old girl, Stacy Stites. When asked by Special Prosecutor Lisa Tanner approximately what time he believed the victim to have died, he answered around 3 a.m. on April 23, 1996. A few years later, I asked him how he came up with that specific time at trial.
In your trial testimony, you said that time of the death was around 3 a.m. Do you remember how you could have came to that conclusion?
We know when she was last seen and we know when the body was found, so we have a precise time.
So Dr. Bayardo's testimony regarding the victim's time of death was based on the word of Stacy's live-in boyfriend and fiancé and local police officer, Jimmy Fennell, who told police she would have left their apartment around 3 a.m. to go to work. Dr. Bayardo's estimated time of death was not based on any actual medical science.
Usually the first question the police officer, the investigators want to know is when did she die, because that will influence the investigation of whom to interview and whether who's telling the truth and who isn't. This is something that all medical examiners and coroners learn immediately, is that there's certain changes in the body that indicate how long somebody's been dead.
Dr. Michael Baden is one of the nation's foremost authorities in forensic pathology. He was a former chief medical examiner for New York City, and he was appointed the chairman of the United States Forensic Panel that investigated the deaths of John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King. He has performed over 20,000 autopsies throughout his decades-long career. After reviewing the autopsy and crime scene video, Dr. Baden, along with 2 other renowned pathologists, concluded that the victim had died much earlier than Dr. Bayardo had testified, most likely well before midnight on April 22nd.
In my opinion, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, she was dead before midnight of the day, the next day that she was found. And she was dead around midnight. She was already dead.
Experts also noted it appeared obvious that the body had been moved at least 3 to 4 hours after the murder by looking at telltale signs of the body's condition.
The appearance of Stacy Stites' body at the scene where she was found later that afternoon, around 3 o'clock that afternoon, which shows a pinkish red color on the front areas of her body that are due to what's called lividity, the settling of blood by gravity after death. And in this instance, there was fixed lividity on the front of her body, and that would indicate that she had been face down for 5 or more hours in one position before she was turned over to the new position.
Lividity, or the gravitational pooling of red blood cells, is a basic forensic indicator of what happened to the body after death. Yet neither rookie field analyst Karen Blakely nor Dr. Bayardo made any mention of this evidence, which is clearly obvious in the crime scene tape.
This is the right hand, and it shows that she's laying face up and hand up, but the lividity
Trigger warning.
is inappropriate.
Content may include sensitive or violent content not suitable for all viewers. Feel free to step out if needed.
Sorry, guys. There is a little bit of sensitive material within this, so my apologies for not warning you guys ahead of time. Welcome, Chick Bait. Good to see you tonight. Thank you, Doodle. On we go.
Because that only developed when the hand was down, when the hand and forearm were in a downward position. So it would support the conclusion that she was laying face down, the hand and the arm were face down for at least 4 or 5 hours in order for this to still be there. One can see in the tips of the fingers pale whiteness in the second, third, fourth, and fifth fingers. And that's because at the time she was laying face down elsewhere, the fingers were against an object which pressed out the lividity. So it gives some information as to her being face down with a hand down for many hours before she was moved to this position.
And finally, the experts agreed that the type and amount of bodily fluids found on the floor of the pickup truck that Stacy and Jimmy Fennell shared, which was found abandoned 8 miles away in a local high school parking lot, was indicative of her being placed and kept in that truck 3 or 4 hours after she had been killed.
And that mucoid type fluid would come out of her nose and mouth, which is an early part of the decomposition process after we die. This takes 3 or 4 hours to develop under these conditions she was in.
That time period would make Jimmy Fennell the one and only person who could have killed her, for he testified that he and Stacy were alone in their apartment from 8 p.m. until 3 a.m. on the night that she was killed. The earlier time of death and the proof of movement of the body hours after the murder completely exonerates Rodney Reed, who, by the state's own admission and Jimmy Fennell's testimony, would not have had access to the victim for that long or anywhere near that time period. None of this basic forensic analysis was ever completed by Dr. Bayardo. But without credible medical testimony or an expert of his own, Rodney Reed was at the mercy of Bayardo's lie.
Were you surprised if I told you the defense never called a medical examiner in this case for their own expert?
I mean, they called me, so I was there. I mean, they didn't call any extra, another medical examiner, another expert on this case. No, it doesn't surprise me. Counties, if these are poor people, the counties don't have the money to pay for experts.
The circumstances surrounding Bayardo's involvement in the autopsy of Stacy Stites indicates that he may well have been incentivized to testify in favor of the prosecution.
We found making money could be at the root of the problem.
A 2016 investigative report by Austin's KXAN news team uncovered a decades-long scheme by Bayardo to increase his salary by conducting out-of-county autopsies and pocketing the proceeds. Stacy Stites was one of those autopsies.
An analysis of Bayardo's near 3 decades in office shows he consistently performed between 395 and 823 autopsies a year. Over time, Bayardo raked in around $2.6 million performing autopsies for 45 other counties.
To protect his lucrative arrangement, it makes sense that Bayardo would bend his testimony to support the prosecutors who work for the same county that paid him his extra fees. Bayardo specifically testified he did not financially benefit from Stacy Stites' autopsy, though records indicate he clearly did. Despite Bayardo's lack of credibility and his conflict of interests and his own signed statement that now recants his original time of death estimate, Texas courts have refused to even consider the alternative evidence brought forth by Dr. Bodden.
Dr. Bodden, free to leave.
Yes, I'll leave.
I meant he has more important things to do.
This is important. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you.
And so Bayardo's lie still stands as a key fact in the case against Rodney Reed that now has him on the verge of execution by the state of Texas. It was a simple lie from a medical examiner that went unchallenged by an overmatched and underprepared defense team. But it was a lie that single-handedly covered up the many lies that preceded it in the case against Mr. Reed, such as the lies of the prosecution, who failed to hand over crucial DNA evidence that placed other police officers and friends of Jimmy Fennell at the scene of the crime, and the lies of the lead investigator, Rocky Wardlow, who covered for Jimmy Fennell by not checking the apartment he shared with Stacy and returning the pickup truck before adequate testing could be completed. And finally, it covered up the biggest lie of all, specifically Jimmy Fennell's denial when asked if he was involved in the murder of Stacy Stites. A lie that now has been proven beyond any reasonable doubt by irrefutable scientific facts.
I knew Stacy. She was a year or two older than me. I worked at the HEB in Bastrop. We were talking about her engagement ring, and I was like, "Oh, are you so excited to get married?" And she said she really wasn't so excited to get married, and quickly followed that with saying that she was actually sleeping with a black guy named Rodney. Just didn't realize that what I had to say meant so much in this case. We were talking about her engagement ring, and I was like, "Oh, are you so excited to get married?" And she said she really wasn't so excited to get married, and quickly followed that with saying that she was actually sleeping with a black guy named Rodney.
Okay. Start with your name and your employment with HEB and the time frame that happened in.
Okay. My name's Alicia Slater, and I worked at the HEB in Bastrop from 1995 to 1996 before I graduated high school. I knew Stacy. She was a year or two older than me, and didn't work in the same department or anything. I was just the bagger and the cart girl outside mostly, but we just knew each other through work, and we had lunch together in the break room quite often.
Proof of a pre-existing consensual sexual relationship between Rodney Reed and Stacy Stites would be a key exonerating piece of evidence in his case, for proving the relationship would provide a reasonable explanation to why a small amount of Reed's sperm was found on the victim. In fact, in a 2012 denial of Rodney Reed's appeal, Texas Court of Criminal Appeals Judge Andrew W. Austin wrote that Reed's claim of a consensual relationship is effectively the beginning and end of his assertion of innocence. Austin further stated that all witnesses to this relationship had been friends and associates of Rodney Reed and not of Stacy Stites, and therefore were unreliable. Finally, Austin wrote that because Reed's claim that he had an affair with Stacy Stites does not have credible evidentiary support, his claims of actual innocence is doomed.
Good night, chick babe.
But what if such a witness existed?
There was one instance where we were having lunch in the break room together, and it was just the two of us, and she pretty much was confiding in me. We were talking about her engagement ring, and I was like, "Oh, are you so excited to get married?" And she said she really wasn't so excited to get married.
Thanks, 12 Gauge. Always a pleasure, brother, to see you stopping by. Thanks again. Get a good night's sleep, my friend. Guys, please go check out 12 Gauge's channel if you have not yet. 12 Gauge Investigative. Great stuff over there. He puts in a lot of hard work, and he does a great job. So please go check him out if you will. The link will be in chat for you guys. So thank you again, and take care, 12 Gauge. Always good time. Always good to see you in here, sir. Thank you so much.
And quickly followed that with saying that she was actually sleeping with a black guy named Rodney, and that she was, not sure what her fiance would do if he found out, and she had to be pretty careful about it. So she wasn't really excited about getting married because she was sleeping with a black dude named Rodney, she said.
According to Rodney Reed's first lawyer, Jimmy Brown, there were multiple co-workers at Stacy's grocery store job who knew and witnessed a relationship between she and Rodney Reed.
On everything that Rodney told me that happened, I was able to verify.
In a 2015 affidavit, Jimmy Brown states when he returned to the store a week later, those same witnesses were unwilling to speak with him under a presumed threat from the Bastrop police. Witness intimidation and threat were two of the main reasons Rodney Reed's lawyers had difficulty establishing the relationship during the original trial. However, since then, 20 different people have come forward in their personal knowledge that the relationship indeed existed, including Alicia Slater, who moved to California shortly after the murder and did not realize until recently how important her information was to the case.
At the time, I didn't speak up because I did know I had something to lose. I had my whole family still in Bastrop. I didn't want to, have anything happen to them because I'm implicating a cop from the next, town over. So, I had big regret that I didn't come out in the beginning and say anything. And then I just didn't realize that what I had to say meant so much in this case. Because if that's what it came down to, yeah, they were having an affair. She told me. I thought more people knew about it as well. So, I 100% remember everything about that conversation. And she was scared in a way. And then she was also super happy because she's sleeping with this guy named Rodney, and I didn't know who Rodney was, didn't know who Jenny was. So, I have zero affiliation to either one of them. I'm not a family member. All I knew was Stacy from work. And all I know is what she told me. And that's all I can, I stand by my word with that.
The fact that a 19-year-old girl would not want to volunteer information that could implicate a local police officer in a murder is highly understandable. And yet it underscores the major issue of witness intimidation in the case against Rodney Reed.
So I just realized when I heard that it was still happening and that he was actually had an execution date set, I felt like it's now or never. I need to say something because if that was the only thing that convicted him, and I had no idea about any of the other stuff, if just that was a reason why he was convicted, then that's not true, and I needed to say something because Stacy physically sat there and told me she was sleeping with him. I never saw them together. I never saw him, but I knew what she told me. So I knew it had some implication in the case.
In addition to Alicia Slater, fellow H-E-B grocery store worker Leroy Ybarra has stated he actually saw Reed visiting Stites at the store. And Stacy Stites' cousin, Buddy Horton, has sworn he saw the two together at a local Dairy Queen a few months before her murder.
I just wanted to help in whatever way I can. So that still stands. If I needed to come in and be a credible witness that had nothing to do with any of them, and I just happened to work with Stacy and just happened to talk to her in the break room, that's definitely something I'd be willing to do to help this. So.
And you also be willing to take a polygraph test?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I would be willing to take a polygraph test for everything I've stated.
And yet, instead of pursuing this vital piece of evidence and seeking the truth, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals have completely ignored Alicia Slater's sworn affidavit.
State prosecutors are now asking to execute convicted murderer Rodney Reed,
with medical experts now agreeing Stacy Stites was not sexually assaulted.
There was no evidence, absolutely no evidence in the autopsy or the findings or the photographs that she had been sexually assaulted.
And multiple eyewitnesses verifying a pre-existing relationship between Stacy Stites and Rodney Reed. There remains absolutely no physical evidence linking Reed to the crime that he is now set to die for. Alternatively, there is an overwhelming abundance of evidence implicating Stacy Stites' police officer boyfriend, Jimmy Fennell, as well as clear indications of a cover-up by fellow police officers, investigators, and prosecutors to keep that truth from ever being known. The existence of a cover-up and those involved in it could be a key contributing factor as to why the state has refused to acknowledge the truth in this case, despite convincing and credible evidence of Reed's innocence. Which leaves the question, how broken is our justice system that it would move forward and knowingly execute an innocent man? And what could be done now to stop them?
Jimmy Fennell Jr. is accused of sexually assaulting a woman he detained.
He just kept telling me to shut up. He asked me to dance for him.
Since then, there have been a lot of things that I've learned in that 20 years or heard about that have made me wonder if Rodney was framed.
I remember after driving by, I thought, man, that guy could have killed Stacey just by the way he's acting.
I have questions now about whether Rodney was really guilty.
In the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals' most recent denial of relief for Rodney Reed, they determined his lawyers failed to prove that no rational juror could have found him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Yet, at least one original juror from the trial has publicly stated on national television that she now has those exact doubts.
Since then, there have been a lot of things that I've learned in that 20 years or heard about that have made me wonder if Rodney was framed.
One thing she may have learned is the existence of a lab report indicating the DNA presence of 2 police officers on 2 beer cans found near the body. One officer, David Hall, was Jimmy Finnell's patrol partner and neighbor. The other officer was Ed Samela, who was an investigator on the Stacey Stites case and ended up dead 6 months later due to a suspicious gunshot to the head. Of course, this DNA report never made it to Rodney Reed's defense team, and the jury was never made aware of it. Maybe the juror learned that Jimmy Finnell had bragged during his police training class that if he ever discovered his girlfriend cheating, he would strangle her with a belt so he wouldn't leave any fingerprints. Or maybe the juror heard about one of the many stories of Finnell's uncontrollable anger, such as the one witnessed by former Bastrop County jailer Shane Wallace.
I remember one day I was going to look at the field, and Jimmy Finnell was standing at the edge of the road with a Hispanic girl. He was having the most intense argument with her, and she was standing there taking it out. I remember after driving by, I thought, man, that guy could have killed Stacey just by the way he's acting. I mean, he's angry enough right now that he could have done it, just looking at the way his mannerisms and his behavior.
Perhaps the juror heard about the affidavit from the woman who started dating Finnell 3 months after the murder, who claimed Finnell stalked and screamed obscenities at her for months after they broke up. She also claims he called all black people by the N-word. He pulled over and harassed future boyfriends and made her scared for herself and her family. This woman claimed she filed a police report over Finnell's harassment, which would have been required to be turned over to Rodney Reed's defense team and would have been admissible at trial to impeach Finnell's character. However, Giddings police say the report was lost and Reed's lawyers were never made aware of Finnell's frightening misconduct right prior to the trial. Or maybe the juror heard that the Giddings Police Department and Jimmy Finnell were sued by a local man who claimed in February 1996, just a month before Stacey Stites' murder, Jimmy Finnell, while on duty, threatened his life with a loaded gun pressed to his head for absolutely no reason. This lawsuit was removed from court 2 months prior to Rodney Reed being arrested, and its resolution has been obscured from public record. Perhaps the juror heard of Jimmy Finnell's ex-wife, who confided in a coworker that she was nervous of Finnell's jealousy and temper. She had suspicions of Finnell's involvement in the Stites murder, and she showed up to work with bruises on her face, claiming they were caused by Finnell in a fit of anger. Or, most likely, the juror heard about the 10-year prison sentence Finnell received for raping a woman he had taken into custody.
Jimmy Finnell Jr. is accused of sexually assaulting a woman he detained.
This victim was courageous enough to come forward, press charges, and be interviewed on national television about the violent crime.
He just kept telling me to shut up. He asked me to dance for him. And I told him no. When I told him no, he got mad. And he grabbed me and slammed me up against the back of his car where the trunk is. I kept telling him to stop, but he just told me to shut up, that I knew I liked it. And then if I told anybody, that he'd hunt me down when he got out of prison and kill me.
This victim's courage to come forward empowered many other victims of Finnell's sexual crimes to contact authorities, including a woman who claimed in the spring of 2007, Finnell took her into custody, strip searched her, and drove her to a secluded dirt road where he raped her. Another victim, in August 2007, claimed Finnell planted drugs on her, pushed her into nearby bushes, and requested that they meet up later for sex in order for her to avoid jail or having her children taken away from her. And many other women came forward, mostly poor and with criminal backgrounds. And though investigators found their claims to be credible and consistent, Georgetown police did not bring any additional charges against Fennell for these accusations, and the true number of his victims will never be known. It's hard to tell exactly what new information has given the juror doubts, and equally difficult to discern why the Texas courts have not been swayed by such an obvious pattern of violent behavior, and instead have opted to move forward with an execution in this case, despite such serious concerns.
Now, the man who was originally the person of interest in the murder of Stacey Stites will be released on parole next Friday. Jimmy Fennell is finishing a 10-year sentence for an unrelated crime of kidnapping and improper sexual activity with a person in custody.
Additional evidence pointing to Fennell includes the victim's clipped fingernails, a method used to remove forensic evidence that would have been known by a police officer, and a staged crime scene indicating the attacker knew the victim and wanted her to be found. And the fact that Jimmy Fennell surreptitiously closed the bank account that he shared with Stacey Stites on the morning of her disappearance, hours before she was found dead. And finally, the 2 failed polygraph tests, which indicated Fennell lied when asked if he was involved in the murder of Stacey Stites. After the second failed test, Fennell pled the 5th and requested an attorney. Another critical fact kept from the jurors when deciding Rodney Reed's fate.
A former Georgetown police officer released from prison after serving 9.5 years for kidnapping and raping a woman he'd arrested.
Imagine how much more evidence may have been recovered tying Fennell to the murder had lead investigator Rocky Wardlow actually done his job and searched the apartment that Jimmy Fennell and Stacey Stites shared.
There's always something that doesn't get done, and searching her apartment was that thing here. I wish they would have searched her apartment. I think in hindsight, they wish they would have searched the apartment.
But he didn't, and instead forfeited a key opportunity to gather forensic evidence from the location she was last seen alive, and we now know she was most likely killed. Rocky Wardlow also failed to fully process the abandoned pickup truck, especially the biological evidence found on the front floorboard noted by investigators that would have confirmed Stacey's earlier time of death, thus exonerating Reed. Instead, Wardlow returned the truck to Jimmy Fennell 3 days later, who sold it immediately to a local dealership. And finally, Wardlow failed to fully interview or properly document interviews with key witnesses close to the victim, including neighbor and close friend of Stacey, Carla Hall, who spent the whole evening before the murder with Stacey, and who has come forth and stated on multiple occasions, including this 2015 Facebook Messenger chat with Giddings resident Wendy Wallace, that she was awoken at 3:30 a.m. on the night of the murder and seeing Stacey Stites' mother's car, which she knew Stacey and Jimmy also shared, being driven through the front yard of her mobile home. A vital piece of information that directly implicates Fennell, who testified he was at home sleeping at this time, and possible other co-conspirators, while completely exonerating Rodney Reed. In fact, recently discovered police notes, whose authors remain unknown, indicates that an officer confirmed this very same story with Carla Hall shortly after the murder, but her statement never made it in official police reports, and Carla Hall, who was one of the last people to see Stacey Stites alive, was never called by prosecutors or the defense at Reed's original trial. The question is not whether Rocky Wardlow was covering up for Jimmy Fennell's crime, but why? How could Rodney Reed ever expect justice when the police in charge of the investigation were manipulating the evidence from the very beginning? And how could the state, in good conscience, execute a man with all of the extensive evidence implicating another suspect? Documented jurors' doubt.
I have questions now about whether Rodney was really guilty.
And so many critical questions concerning the integrity of the police who investigated the case. It's almost as if the state is more afraid of facing the truth than they are of carrying out an actual wrongful execution. But what if a new witness statement were to emerge that revealed that Jimmy Fennell had made arrangements to substantially financially benefit from Stacey Stites' death? Would they listen then?
Who has a motive for this?
Well, at this point, the boyfriend does.
That's right.
That's a prime suspect. The person that we're trying to find is in the exile.
On May 4th, 1998, the victim's mother, Carol Stites, testified about the day before her daughter was murdered. She testified that she had become depressed about the upcoming wedding between her daughter and Jimmy Fennell. At the trial, she blames herself and her nervous condition for the wedding anxiety. However, a closer look at police notes, witness statements, and Carol Stites' own handwritten journal entries indicate the relationship between Stites and Fennell was fraught with jealousy and suspicion, a key dynamic that was never conveyed to jurors at the original trial. The first evidence of conflict within the relationship is Stacy's coworker, Alicia Slater.
She said she really wasn't so excited to get married, and quickly followed that with saying that she was actually sleeping with a black guy named Rodney, and that she was, not sure what her fiance would do if he found out, and she had to be pretty careful about it.
And now we have a new statement from Carla Hall, who was married to David Hall, Jimmy Fennell's patrol partner on the Giddings Police Department at the time of the murder. Carla Hall was also a close friend of Stacy Stites and a neighbor that lived about 200 yards from the apartment that Jimmy Fennell and Stacy Stites shared. Additionally, she spent the evening before the murder with Stacy, and besides Carol Stites and Jimmy Fennell, was one of the last people to see the victim alive.
Stacy and I had several conversations. She was always at the house. They lived next door to us. There is one conversation that does stick in my head, which I thought was strange. She was sitting on the armrest of my recliner, and she was sitting there leaning up against the back of it. And she just kind of made an off-the-wall comment about, I have a friend. I met a friend, and if Jimmy ever found out, he would kill me. And that's where the conversation ended, because the men folk came inside the house and she didn't want to discuss it anymore. I never got a chance to question her about it. I just thought that if she wanted me to know more, she would tell me more.
Do you remember when that conversation occurred?
I want to say a week or two before. I don't recall the exact date.
Shockingly, Carla Hall was never called to testify at Rodney Reed's original trial, and now Carla Hall claims she was never even interviewed by investigators following Stacy's death.
I know I didn't talk to any law enforcement officers about it. They never came and questioned me. They never once brought it up at all.
You don't recall any sort of interviews with any investigators?
I had no interviews with any investigators at all.
Do you think you would have testified at the time that Stacy made that comment to you prior to her death, if you would have been called to trial?
I would have brought it up and mentioned it had they either brought me to trial or at least came in and interviewed me about the day before and the events leading up.
But Carla Hall was not called to testify at the trial, and once again, key witness testimony was kept from jurors who were deciding Rodney Reed's guilt or innocence. However, recovered police notes from the investigation back up Carla's account, indicating trouble within Stacy Stites and Jimmy Fennell's relationship. Saturday, April 20th, 2 days before the murder, police notes indicate Carol told them there was a fight over the details of the wedding. Carol's journal indicates the following night, on April 21st, Fennell's rude behavior upset her and she became depressed about the upcoming wedding. On the night of the murder, on April 22nd, Carol Stites wrote that Fennell's behavior again upset her to the point where she questioned whether Stacy should consider backing out of the wedding before it was too late. To which Stacy ominously replied, "You don't know what stress is." Finally, soon after the murder on April 23rd, another uncovered police note indicates Carol Stites told investigators Fennell and her daughter argued the night before the homicide and pointed out that Fennell was jealous of everyone. Who Fennell may have been jealous of is unclear, but the candidates are many. First, there was Greg Corner, the father of the daughter Stacy had when she was 15 years old and put up for adoption. Police reports indicate that Stacy Stites had stayed in contact with Greg Corner up until the time of her death. Another potential target of Fennell's jealousy could have been Jerry Ormond, a married man who was carrying out an affair with Stacy around the time she met Fennell. In fact, Fennell fingered Jerry Ormond as a suspect to investigators and also pointed suspicion at former boyfriends John Kirby and Jeremiah Smith. Yet another boyfriend who may have concerned Fennell was John Lastovica, who had enlisted in the military, was stationed in California, but according to Stacy Stites' co-worker, had planned to come back to visit her, unbeknownst to Fennell. Two other former boyfriends of the victim listed in police reports include Robert Campion and Marshall Farrell. Still, another object of Fennell's jealousy could have been Glenn Wright Jr. Glenn Wright's mother, Margaret Wright, called investigators months after the murder and told them her son had been seeing Stacy Stites in the weeks leading up to the murder and feared the relationship had been discovered by Fennell.
Investigations. Yes, sir. I think Stacy was having a liaison. Okay. I'm almost positive of it. I think you got him right under you. I think they got caught.
We've all kind of assumed that.
Who has a motive for this?
Who has a motive? Well, at this point, the boyfriend does.
That's right.
That's the prime suspect. The person that we're trying to find is a liaison.
Margaret Wright, at first, refuses to provide her or her son's name for fear of what might happen.
No, I can't give it to you.
Why?
Because I think he'd be railroaded. You've got a cop and you've got somebody else.
No, nobody's going to be railroaded. I can promise you that. Let me say this. For the longest time, we've had our suspicions. Okay?
I think she was having one little last flame. She never gave it a second thought about doing away with her marriage.
Yeah.
And I think you got him under your nose, too.
You know, you're following the same track that I've been following and that several other people have been following.
Glenn Wright Jr. and all of Stacy Stites' other former boyfriends were investigated and cleared. And then you have Rodney Reed, who has 20 different people that have come forward to verify his relationship with Stacy Stites, and one witness who confirms Fennell had suspicions and actually confronted Rodney Reed and his cousin about it.
2 weeks before Stacy Stites' murder, me and Rodney, we were walking down Hill Street. This car, he just come flying up. Then he just came to a stop. He told Rodney, he called out Rodney's name 3 times. Hey, Rodney, I know it's you, Rodney. But he got out of the car. Fennell got out of the car. The passenger, I don't know who he was. He was sitting there quiet and stuff by the car. And Fennell came over there, started telling Rodney he knows that about him and Stacy and so forth, so forth. At first, I thought he was going to shoot Rodney. You know, the way he got up out of the car. But it wasn't like that. You know, they were just having words. But he told Rodney what made me mad and hurt me. He told Rodney, "You gonna pay." So we took it as a threat.
Chris Aldridge, who was also Rodney Reed's alibi on the night of the murder, was never called to testify at the original trial. Instead, Fennell, under oath at trial, claimed he and Stacy had no ongoing conflicts at the time of her murder, a statement we now know is verifiably untrue. Yet this false narrative has been perpetuated by Stacy Stites' half-sister Deborah Oliver in interviews with the local press.
They were very happy together. They were looking forward to getting married. And never have we thought that Jimmy was guilty of murdering my sister ever.
Yet recently, uncovered handwritten notes attributed to Stacy Stites' sister indicate the family had deep suspicions of Fennell after the murder, including questioning his demeanor and behavior at the funeral, noting that he was acting paranoid after the murder, and wondering why he refused to return phone calls from a private investigator the family had hired to look into the case. Yet, during his trial testimony, Fennell claimed he did not recall the private investigator ever trying to get in touch with him, a claim we now know to be another lie. Such information would have been vital evidence for a jury to hear before sentencing another man to die for Stacy Stites' murder, but they didn't. Instead, jurors were left with the impression that the relationship and upcoming wedding were trouble-free, which we now know to be completely untrue. So why would Stacy Stites stay committed to marrying Jimmy Fennell despite her fears? A clue may lie in a recently recovered police note from an interview with the victim's friend, Jeremiah Smith, a former boyfriend who had visited with Stites a couple weeks before her death. According to police notes, Stites confided in Smith that she had suffered a miscarriage in late February or early March of 1996, about 2 months after she moved in with Fennell and a month and a half before she was killed. Nowhere else in police notes or trial testimony is Stacey Stites' pregnancy mentioned again, a confusing omission over such a pertinent detail. Did Stacey Stites become pregnant, and did that precipitate the decision for Stites and Fennell to marry so suddenly? And if she was pregnant, was Stites sure of the identity of the father? And could this question have been the cause of increased tension between her and Jimmy Fennell? And still, yet another critical piece of evidence has emerged that was not available for jurors to see. In a letter dated July 25th, 2019, sent to the presiding judge in Rodney Reed's case, a longtime local insurance agent whose identity we are protecting per her request claims she sold Stacey Stites a life insurance policy soon before her murder. The agent writes, when Stites questioned the necessity of the policy, given her young age, Fennell responded with the agent present, if I ever catch you messing around on me, I will kill you, and no one will ever know it was me that killed you. A stunning exchange the agent remembers clearly to this day. Confirmation as to whether the policy was actually purchased and whether or not Jimmy Fennell was the beneficiary of this policy is still to be determined. CC'd on this letter was Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, current Texas Governor Greg Abbott, current Bastrop District Attorney Brian Gertz, and presiding judge Doug Shaver. With this information in hand, officials chose to move forward with Rodney Reed's execution date, unmoved by such potentially exonerating evidence. And finally, just days ago, on October 3rd, 2019, another key witness has come forward with damning evidence of Fennell's guilt. Former Lee County Sheriff's Deputy Jim Clampett has now signed a sworn affidavit that states, while attending Stacey Stites' funeral back in 1996, he heard Fennell say to Stacey Stites' dead body, "You got what you deserved." It shocked him at the time, and it has bothered him ever since. Clampett states he finally came forward with this information because if he didn't, he would not be able to live with himself. Cryptically, Clampett suggests officials inquire with former Lee County Deputy and current Lee County Sheriff Rodney Meyer and former Texas Ranger and lead investigator on the case, Rocky Wardlow, for more information. The investigation continues as the execution date nears.
I would say without hesitation that this is one of the clearest, unequivocal cases of gross misjudgment, of travesty of justice that I've ever seen. You can argue about a lot of cases, and Dr. Phil, you and I have talked about some of these. In this case, there simply is no argument.
The state had a weak case against Rodney Reed. They lacked witnesses and a motive, and they relied on a scientifically impossible timeline to link Reed to the crime based on the condition of the body, and physical evidence which indicates the murder occurred well before Rodney Reed could even have had the opportunity. There were absolutely no fingerprints, hairs, or biological evidence from Rodney Reed found in the truck that prosecutors allege Stacey Stites was violently abducted from.
The only fingerprints in that vehicle belonged to Stacey and her boyfriend. So where's Rodney? Why isn't his fingerprints on the steering wheel anywhere on the vehicle?
There were no footprints or fingerprints found at the crime scene or on any of the many items recovered and tested in this case.
Then when you look at the body, Stacey's nails were cut.
It's almost like somebody went out of their way to make sure that any DNA that was possibly there was gone.
Who else would know that except somebody maybe in the law enforcement business? This is typical of a staged crime scene.
In fact, all prosecutors had and all they could rely on is one single piece of evidence to tie Rodney Reed to the murder of Stacey Stites: DNA from sperm recovered from the victim. But even this evidence, which Reed explains by a consensual encounter with Stacey Stites about 24 hours before her murder, is is so tainted by improper procedures, undocumented results, and false and misleading testimony that it raises even more questions about the ethical and professional conduct of the prosecutors and state witnesses. The first mistake by investigators was to process the body of the victim at the crime scene, rather than in a controlled medical examiner's office or lab.
The taking of swabs have to be done in very controlled conditions with a lot of light on an autopsy table to make sure one gets only the vaginal semen and separately the anal, anything in the anus.
Dr. Joseph Warren, a 30-year veteran of forensic science and serology, agrees.
I don't like the fact that the tests were done in the field or the samples were collected in the field. I think they probably should have been collected at autopsy and then sent over to the lab and done inside a laboratory.
While the video appears to show DPS serologist Karen Blakely conducting an acid phosphatase test on the vaginal swabs from the victim and her underwear, which would turn the samples purple in the presence of semen, both results appear to be clear or negative for the presence of spermatozoa. Yet Blakely later testified her result was a 2+ out of 4, or a little on the weak side of medium.
The fact that they got a moderate, what they call a moderate reaction, which is a 2+ reaction, moderate reaction, does lend that there was some degradation occurring. Could have been placed there, the semen, a couple of days prior to the actual crime itself.
The field notes taken by serologist trainee Javier Flores were never documented in an official report and were never presented as evidence to jurors. Critically, Karen Blakely testified at trial that upon returning that night to the DPS laboratory in Austin, she created a lab slide from her vaginal swabs, and on it, she testified that she found 3 intact sperm with head and tail. However, there is no mention of this finding in any of her reports or notes. This slide, or a photographic representation of it, was never entered into evidence or presented to the jury, a suspicious omission of the state's one and only piece of evidence, which jurors never saw and Rodney Reed's defense never challenged.
You could have brought in the slides themselves for further examination or to present as evidence. It just depends whether they were requested by the state or not.
The importance of Karen Blakely testifying that she found intact sperm cannot be overstated. When prosecutor Lisa Tanner asked Karen Blakely about the significance of finding intact sperm, she incorrectly cited a 1981 medical paper that said the outside length of time that intact sperm can be found is only 26 hours. However, the paper that Karen Blakely cites actually listed and referred to other studies which had documented cases of up to 72 hours for finding intact sperm, misinforming the jury on this key fact.
Intact sperm can be seen days and weeks after the death, at least 3 or 4 days after death.
Yet Lisa Tanner would use the false testimony of Karen Blakely's incorrect timeline repeatedly throughout the trial as proof that Rodney Reed was the killer.
How could he have not killed her when his semen got into her body at the time of her death?
On April 30th, 2018, 20 years after the trial, Texas DPS Crime Lab Director Brady Mills finally acknowledged the limitations to Blakely's testimony and pointed out the errors she made in misstating the scientific research.
The testimony at the time given at the original trial was incorrect about the spermatozoa not remaining viable beyond 24 hours. Spermatozoa can remain viable for 72 hours.
Of course, jurors were never provided this vital correction. After the body of the victim was improperly processed by Karen Blakely, it was delivered to the Travis County Medical Examiner's Office to be examined by Robert Bayardo. Bayardo's autopsy report indicates that the victim's vaginal area was intact and free of injury. He also reports that the victim's rectal area is intact and also free of injury. He reports he finds a few spermatozoa on a vaginal swab slide, which, like Karen Blakely's slide, has never been produced as evidence. And Bayardo reports that rectal smears are negative for spermatozoa. Yet critically, at the trial, Bayardo actually lies to jurors and tells them that in fact he did find spermatozoa on rectal smears, in direct contradiction to his own autopsy and toxicology reports.
Tests that were done by Dr. Biardo did not show any.
Okay, almost every bit of testimony that has been processed in this case is lies. How in the hell is this guy sitting on death row? This is one of the worst scenarios I've seen yet. This is insane to me. There's no way that this is right. It's unbelievable to me.
Evidence of semen in the anus, and then when he testified that even though the autopsy report said no semen, that there were some sperm heads that he saw.
Bayardo would continue to contradict his own findings under examination by prosecutor Lisa Tanner throughout the trial, describing what he initially reported in his autopsy as abrasions or irritation of the victim's anus as lacerations, defined as a torn or jagged cut during his trial testimony. A critical difference in terminology that should not be interchanged by a trained pathologist under oath. Lisa Tanner continued to use the word laceration to describe the injury, and later asks Bayardo about the rectal tearing of the victim, significantly advancing the degree of the injury without correction by Bayardo or trial judge Harold Towsley or objection from Reed's defense.
There's no injury there at all. There's dilatation, it's dilated more than normal, but that's normal for a dead body. There was no evidence of penetration, no evidence really of any tears. They were irregular, the skin is a little irregular around the anus, and sometimes it can be misinterpreted as a tear when it isn't a tear. And there's no blood and no evidence of injury to the anus taken at the time of the autopsy.
Experts also point out a small amount of Reed's DNA, later reportedly recovered by a DPS investigator on a rectal swab, which had been previously determined by Bayardo to be negative for sperm and spermatozoa, could have been improperly placed there because of improper evidence gathering techniques by Karen Blakely.
Could have come from improper handling of the swabs, could have come from contamination issues.
There was some semen found, I think, and that could have just dripped down into the anal area when the body was moved around at the scene and then later moved to the morgue.
You just can't say. That's one of the issues we deal a lot more with these days. Our DNA tests we run today are a lot more sensitive than the ones they ran back when these tests were done in this case.
Pointing to the victim's injury-free vaginal and rectal areas, the very limited amount of sperm DNA recovered from the victim.
Millions of sperms are found in a CC. In this case, just a few sperm heads were found.
And Bayardo's incorrect diagnosis of a naturally dilated anus as evidence of sexual assault have led pathologist experts who have reviewed this case to conclude that Stacey Stites was not sexually assaulted.
There was no evidence, absolutely no evidence in the autopsy or the findings of the photographs that she had been sexually assaulted.
So the question remains, why did Bayardo so critically misrepresent his own report in trial? And how could his medical opinion regarding the sexual assault of Stacey Stites been so wrong?
That's one of the areas that initially mistakes are made where the new pathologist, the new doctor coming in, hasn't seen anuses in dead people before, and that this is perfectly normal, and what we're seeing here.
Robert Bayardo was not a new pathologist, but it's worth remembering that the Stacey Stites autopsy was one of many lucrative.
I don't know if he was innocent, but I don't believe they were 100% positive that he was guilty. That's the problem, Empath. Thank you for being here tonight. But that's the big issue right there. So, but he was executed this evening at 6 p.m. His name was Marcellus Williams. It's a very sad situation.
out-of-county autopsies Bayardo conducted to unlawfully augment his salary.
An analysis of Bayardo's near 3 decades in office shows he consistently performed between 395 and 823 autopsies a year. Over time, Bayardo raked in around $2.6 million performing autopsies for 45 other counties.
Did Bayardo falsify his testimony and alter his conclusions to match the prosecutor's false theory of the crime and to appease the county and state officials who continued to hire and pay him? This wasn't the first time that Bayardo's false testimony directly resulted in a wrongful conviction. Other cases include Anthony Graves, who spent 12 years on death row, and Michael Morton, who spent 25 years in prison before each was finally freed and exonerated. Later in the trial, Lisa Tanner then produced additional critical false testimony from state witness and DPS serologist Wilson Young. When asked on the stand by Tanner about the DNA test results from the breast swabs taken from the victim, he reported that he found DNA that matched Rodney Reed. However, the report he references as evidence while testifying indicates that he did not ever test the breast swabs at all. Blatant false testimony that Lisa Tanner would then use to convince the jury that Reed had attacked Stites right prior to her death.
Why Will testified to the DNA result that he never ran, I don't know. I was looking at what you sent me on the email, and there's no DNA result on the breast swab. And maybe he was referring to another report, and that wasn't made clear in the testimony. Obviously, that's extremely problematic from a lot of points of view, ethical, etc.
Again, Rodney Reed did not have an independent medical expert to counter Robert Bayardo's lies and misrepresentations, and his own court-appointed DNA expert, Elizabeth Johnson, had a conflict of interest in this case that should have precluded her involvement in the first place. Elizabeth Johnson had been fired a year before the trial from the Harris County Medical Examiner's Office and subsequently won a $315,000 judgment for wrongful termination, a judgment which was under appeal at the time of Reed's trial. Still, Johnson was appointed by trial judge Harold Towsley, and in her reported results, she only lists 6 out of 44 items she was required to test, and none of the testing results done on additional suspects. And serious questions remain whether Johnson even ever received or opened critical blood and evidence samples from the state to test at all, which would explain why she did not discover the DNA of police officers David Hall and Ed Samela on the swabs of beer cans found where the body was discovered, as the state's own crime lab did, as indicated on a lab report that was never provided to Reed's defense at trial. Mere months after the trial, state officials settled Johnson's lawsuit for $375,000. In 2012, 14 years after the trial, Robert Bayardo finally signed a sworn affidavit on Rodney Reed's behalf.
On August 13th of 2012, said time of death, if the prosecuting attorneys had advised me they intended to use my time of death estimate as a scientifically reliable opinion, I would have advised them not to do so.
Bayardo signed this statement. If the prosecuting attorneys had advised me that they intended to present testimony that spermatozoa cannot remain intact in the vaginal cavity for more than 26 hours, and argue that Ms. Stites died within 24 hours of the spermatozoa being deposited, I would advise them that neither the testimony nor the argument was medically or scientifically supported.
And with regard to sexual assault, there is no indication that the spermatozoa was placed there in any fashion other than consensually.
Yet, during closing arguments of the trial, Lisa Tanner repeated Bayardo's false testimony to jurors, describing how Bayardo found anal tears that occurred at the time of the death. And she repeated Bayardo's now recanted lie that he found spermatozoa in the rectal area of the victim. Tanner passionately concluded that therefore the sperm was the smoking gun, based on the false timeline created by Karen Blakely's inaccurate citation of the scientific data on when intact sperm can be recovered after a sexual encounter. During closing remarks, Lisa Tanner also repeats the lie that Reed's DNA was found on breast swabs, proof that tied Reed to the crime, proof that simply did not exist. Unable to use accurate science and honest testimony, and without witnesses, a motive, or any other trace evidence, prosecutors were forced to use false testimony and the misrepresented DNA evidence to convince jurors of Rodney Reed's guilt. And sadly, it worked.
The state is prosecuting. If their own witness says, you misinterpreted what I said, you misused what I said, I now tell you that that is wrong, it seems to me they have to own that problem and step back from that conviction.
This is prosecutorial.
Thank you.
Texas judges and courts.
So that woman, in her own sense, that's prosecutorial misconduct. She needs to be going to jail at this point. That's bullshit, guys, and that is absolutely illegal and is prosecutable and chargeable. She absolutely can go to prison for that, okay? This is bullshit. I want to know why she's so dead set on prosecuting this guy. This is insane.
Continue to rely on the now refuted junk science that was incorrectly presented at trial.
At this point in time, the prosecution must take responsibility for not having presented the proper evidence, for having allowed improper evidence to be introduced, and how any judicial branch, in this case, the top level court in the state of Texas, can not review and accept all of this testimony and stop this planned execution is beyond me. There's no way in the world that this can proceed.
When I told him that I wanted an attorney before I gave him any samples, I told him that in the beginning, and when I told him that, they shipped me off and moved me to LaGrange, but they brought me back 3 or 4 days later, and they wanted me to talk to someone. They wanted me to talk to an attorney. You know, they finally, this 3 or 4 days later, and just so happened it was Howard Jenkins, and I knew that Howard Jenkins, I didn't think that he was an attorney that could handle this type of case, and I told him, I said, well, I'll talk to him. I don't know about having him represent me, but I'll see what's up. Well, they took me out in the hallway with him, and it was just me and him. And then first thing he told me, he said, right now I want to tell you something. He said, I respect you then and I respect you now. And I said, well, what's going on? He said, Bastrop is trying to cover their ass. What he meant by that, I don't know. To this day, I still don't know. But well, I got an idea, you know, that they are covering their asses. But
On August 3rd, 1996, a little over 3 months after the Stacey Stites murder, Bastrop police investigator Ed Semela died due to a suspicious gunshot wound to the head. Ed Semela had been part of the Stacey Stites murder investigation. He was one of the first people on the scene of the abandoned pickup truck where he collected the initial evidence, and afterwards, he accompanied Jimmy Fennell to the wrecker where the truck had been towed so they could examine it together. 2 weeks prior to his death, Ed Semela resigned from the Bastrop Police Department and surrendered his guns. Officer Paul Alexander, in an unrecorded interview, told this reporter that he himself confiscated 2 handguns from Semela prior to his resignation. The local newspaper reported that before his resignation, Semela had been indicted for making terroristic threats to an ex-girlfriend, which was cited as the cause for his forced resignation. The indictment and the incident that caused it have not been verified.
The investigation on my brother's death, I do not believe was handled correctly. The Bastrop Police Department came in understand and went to the scene and decided that it was one of their ex-police officers or police officers. Therefore, they backed out and called in the Texas Rangers. And by the lead investigator on that was a man by the name of Rocky Wardlow. Now, I don't know if anybody else knows, but Rocky Wardlow had been going through a divorce a few months earlier and was actually a roommate of my brother. He needed a place to stay. Therefore, I felt Rocky Wardlow should have stepped back as the lead investigator on that instead of going forward with it. I believe that was handled all incorrectly.
The only remaining report on Ed Semella's death comes from Rocky Wardlow himself, who assigned himself the lead investigator on the case. In this report, he claims that he was called to the scene by Bastrop police officer David Board. David Board had advised Wardlow that he was on the scene of an apparent suicide at a local Bastrop apartment complex. Scott Semella, Ed's brother, had an opportunity to speak with the neighbor who last saw Ed alive, heard the gunshot, and called police, as he relayed here in this 2015 documentary released by A&E Television.
The neighbor across from him, he said, your brother walked into his apartment. I went back into mine to get some more boxes. He said, I heard a shot. He said, I came out immediately, knocked on his door and hollered for him, and nobody answered. He said, I turned the doorknob, it was locked. So he said, I went back in and I called dispatch. He said, I went, opened the door, and there were already 3 police officers standing in your brother's door, and the door hadn't been kicked open.
This account directly contradicts with Rocky Wardlow's report, which states the neighbor waited 15 minutes to call police and omits any information on how police gained access to the apartment. It also makes no mention of the fact that neighbors checked the door and found it locked. Though Wardlow writes that Semella was personally known to him, he never reveals in his report or in his trial testimony that he had in fact lived with Semella, and at one point he had a key to the same apartment where the shooting took place. A glaring omission of fact and a serious conflict of interest. Wardlow's report and testimony indicate he determined that the death was caused by suicide due to a letter he discovered written by Ed Semella's ex-girlfriend found on the scene, and a subsequent interview with that same girlfriend who reportedly told Wardlow that Semella had been calling her repeatedly over the past few days. The letter referred to in this report has never been provided to the Semella family, nor was it ever made available to Reed's defense for verification, and the reported phone messages were erased.
I had to do the cleanup after my brother's alleged suicide. The couch was removed from my brother's apartment. They said it was too unsightly for us to see. I got a call from the laundromat where there's a young lady who folds clothes, washes them and folds them for you by the pound. Said that my brother dropped some clothes off down there. I went down to pick them up and said that he had arrived at the dry cleaners, or at that cleaners. It's about 7 o'clock, 6:30 to 7 o'clock. Dropped them off and said that he would be back in an hour to pick them up because he was going back to Louisiana to see a girl and do a little more gambling because he still had vacation time. And I guess at this time, he knew it had already been fired, but he was getting paid out on vacation. So he was going to go back there and just kind of live it up a little bit. And approximately an hour later, he went to a pulse machine there at the bank and had made 3 transactions for $600, which $200 per transaction. That money and those transaction slips were still sitting in his console of his truck. Approximately 30 minutes later, the man's dead.
None of this information was included in Rocky Wardlow's investigative report. What was included raises serious questions regarding Wardlow's conclusion of suicide, including the fact that Semella was shot on the left side of his head.
My brother's being shot with the left hand is bogus. My brother couldn't do anything with his left hand. He shook too bad. My brother was right-handed.
Another disturbing detail of Wardlow's report and testimony is the fact that Ranger Wardlow did not do a gunpowder residue test on the victim at the scene. When asked why he didn't during testimony in Reed's trial, Wardlow claimed his kit was in his other car at his residence. Yet, maps show Ed Semella's apartment was a mere 3-minute drive to the Bastrop Police Department, where kits were available. Yet no requests were made by Wardlow for responding officers to bring a gunpowder residue kit for testing on Semella. Later, autopsy reports show that hand wipes were taken at the autopsy, but toxicology reports do not indicate that any hand wipe results were recorded. Nevertheless, Wardlow testified during Reed's trial that the hand wipe results from the autopsy were negative.
I mean, the evidence is laying there. I do not believe they investigated anything, or they would have found the laundry, the money slips. They, when an officer or so-called soon dismissed officer, I believe should have been investigated a lot more. I think they investigate a regular homicide more than what they would have done my brothers, because they came to a conclusion the minute they walked in the door.
Wardlow testified during Rodney Reed's trial that he took a vial of Ed Semella's blood to the Department of Public Safety lab for testing for comparison in the Stacey Stites murder investigation. Records indicate that this blood was submitted on August 12, 1996, 9 days after Ed Semella's death. 7 months later, on March 13, 1997, with the Stacey Stites murder still unsolved, and just over 2 weeks before Rodney Reed would be arrested and charged with the murder, Rocky Wardlow requested that the blood of David Hall, Jimmy Fennell's neighbor and fellow Giddings police officer, also be submitted for comparison in the Stacey Stites murder investigation. The Texas DPS lab report by Wilson Young indicates that neither Ed Semella nor David Hall's DNA were found to match any foreign DNA left on the victim, Stacey Stites. Yet David Hall and Ed Semella were both named in a Texas Department of Public Safety lab report that didn't surface until 2 years after Rodney Reed was convicted as possible contributors to DNA found on 2 beer cans recovered from the location where the victim's body was found. Rodney Reed and his defense claim they were never provided this critical information at his trial.
I feel that Lisa Tanner from the Attorney General's office, I feel that she put that off in there to make it look like we had knowledge of it. We didn't have no knowledge of it at all. My habeas attorney, Bill Barber, she called Lisa to the stand. She said she doesn't recall giving it to my defense, but if she didn't give it to us, her investigator gave it to us. Okay, so then we called her investigator, Missy Wolf, on the stand. And we asked her, did she recall giving it to my defense? And she said, well, she didn't recall giving it, but if she didn't, Lisa gave it. So both of them are saying that they're saying they don't recall giving it. And I'm like this, if neither one of them recall giving something that critical, something that important, then they didn't give it.
However, District Judge Harold Towsley, the same judge that had presided over Reed's original trial, where he had denied a defense continuance to adequately prepare for the trial and dismissed key witnesses on Reed's behalf from testifying, including his alibi and witnesses that could have confirmed he and Stacey's relationship, ultimately ruled against Reed in his post-conviction appeal and issued his opinion that the suppressed DNA evidence would not have changed the jury's verdict. Nevertheless, serious questions remain about the motivation of Rocky Wardlow in collecting the blood of Ed Semella and David Hall, considering he ruled both of them out as suspects and specifically testified that David Hall had an alibi, that he was home asleep with his wife, Carla Hall.
I've gotten, these letters that came out in the paper on DNA, testing a beer can and it having David Hall and Ed Semella's DNA on it. I know everybody's heard that. Number one is I want to know what 2 police officers are doing drinking out of the same beer can.
Welcome, Miss Barbara. Blue eyes. Oh, I definitely will. It's been a long day. This is just about over and we're done for the night. I really appreciate you guys joining me. This is deep, guys. This is serious. This is another man that's on death row that's about to lose his life in November. And this case is one of the biggest messes I've ever seen in my life. One of the biggest cases of corruption I've ever seen in my life. I am completely appalled. I haven't been able to say a whole lot through this because of this shit. This is insane to me. And I am going to follow up on this for sure. All right. Yeah, we got another 5 minutes, Miss Sherry. And yes, you're right. It is that time.
That, could, to me, that's just absurd. I feel, I'm not sure, but I feel that could have been placed on the scene for further if someone got out of line.
The use of DNA as a deterrent or a decoy in the Stacey Stites murder case could only have been done by state officials in possession of the evidence, thereby making it extremely difficult to prove. Yet insight into the intimidating practices of the prosecutors in this case are evident in an exchange between Lisa Tanner and Carla Hall, who was a friend and nearby neighbor of Stacey Stites and was married at the time to David Hall, whose DNA was identified on one of the beer cans.
I can't recall the year. Had to be between 2001 and 2005. But I was on a phone call with Lisa Tanner, and I was questioning it. And, I was concerned with the DNA that was found on the beer cans and what that would lead to because of who they said the DNA had belonged to. I just worried about it. And she had made the comment to me, well, you do know that there was a female DNA found on it, and it wasn't Stacey's, and it could be yours. Well, no, I don't drink beer, so I kind of started laying low after that comment. That was when I started leaning toward, wait a minute, something's not right here. And I never had any other contact with the Texas Attorney General after that comment was made. It came across as a threat, but then I went back and, yeah, it did. It came back as a threat for me to be quiet.
What other intimidating or deceptive practices were engaged in by Lisa Tanner and Rocky Wardlow in the arrest and conviction of Rodney Reed? And to what lengths did each go to secure a death sentence of a man whose science now proves is wholly innocent? And what knowledge did Ed Semela have concerning the Stacey Stites murder investigation that could have put him in danger?
I remember there was a time where Stacey, she would come with marijuana. And I was wondering, where was she getting all this marijuana? And I remember her telling me, Edward. She said Edward. And I know Ed Semela by Ed. When you mention Ed, you say his name Ed. Everyone know who you're talking about, Ed Semela, which he was over narcotics, the narcotics division down in Bastrop. And when she said Edward, I was thinking several other people that I know by that name. And it didn't dawn on me that it was him until it came back that he was one of the suspects. And then I started thinking, well, maybe he was giving her the drugs to come to me and possibly so that they can say they had me on videotape. They never had me on videotape. The person that they had in videotape was not me.
I believe my brother got into something and found out way too much, is my feeling on my brother's case. And he was actually sitting back trying to figure out how to go and resolve this, and ended up not being in this world anymore. I believe he had some information that was incriminating to maybe some other officers, maybe not in that county or in another county, that actually led to his death. Yes. Myself, I don't believe they have the correct person in prison over the Stacey Stites murder. And I do believe that if they find out, or if it's found out that somebody else had killed Stacey Stites, they'll find out in my mind who killed my brother.
Texas Ranger Rocky Wardlow, the lead investigator in the Rodney Reed case, who failed to search the apartment that the victim, Stacey Stites, was last seen alive and that she shared with her boyfriend, the main suspect and former Giddings police officer, Jimmy Fennell. Rocky Wardlow, who returned Jimmy Fennell's pickup truck where the victim's body had been kept back to Jimmy Fennell, who was a suspect at the time, just 3 days after the murder, irrevocably losing key evidence and depriving Rodney Reed and his lawyers an opportunity to verify the condition or the contents of the truck or conduct any independent forensic testing on the vehicle from which the state alleges the victim was abducted, and Rocky Wardlow, who failed to do a basic investigation of a suspicious death of investigator Ed Semela, a former roommate of his, a fact that he omits in his written report and in his testimony during Rodney Reed's trial. And Rodney Reed, 21 years on Texas death row, and now weeks away from a state-sponsored execution. An execution by a state who has systematically failed Rodney Reed on every level. An execution that must be stayed immediately, given the evidence which any honest person can clearly see.
Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. This is a mess. I'm going to have to follow up with this to see what else I can find on this, because this is just wrong. I'm sorry. There's a man sitting here getting ready to lose his life in a month. This is complete and total, utter corruption, folks. There's no two ways about it. And this goes all the way. This goes deep, like within the district attorney, the prosecuting attorney. Everybody, this is bullshit. And she works for the attorney general. Wow. She is a liar and a half. Unbelievable, you guys. Yeah, we're going to look into this a little bit more too. So thank you for bringing this to my attention. Rodney Reed. Don't forget that name. We'll be back to it hopefully soon. Thank you guys for joining me tonight. I am burnt out. It's been a long day. I hope to see you guys tomorrow morning for current events and a cup of Joe with Dago. I'd love to do that. I would love the link to this documentary. Absolutely. We're probably going to go over this again when we have more people in here, because this is a big deal to me. There is the link in the chat through Beach City Media. I can't allow for this without making some noise for another person to go through and lose their life. This is insanity to me. And I want to bring up the interview with Rodney Reed as well, because it's crazy. Yes, share the stream out on this tonight, guys, if you will. This needs attention for real. This is wrong in every aspect. So, wow. I took like a half a notebook full of notes on this. My hand is hurting. Anyway, thanks for bringing this to my attention. And I'm glad that we reviewed this tonight at the very least. Thank you so much, Miss Barbara. I appreciate you just in general. And you saying that means a lot to me. 3 shows today, guys. I'm burnt out. It's time for me to hit the hay hardcore and be here in the morning. So I hope you guys are too for coffee with me. We can wake up together and move right along. Thank you, Miss Barbara, again. You guys are amazing. Thank you for following me throughout this whole day. All of you, my mods, you guys are unbelievable. Most of them have been with me all day long since 10 o'clock this morning. You guys rock and roll. I love you guys to death. Thank you guys so very much. Share this out, and thank you. For those of you that haven't, please hit the like button on the way out the door. Subscribe if you have not. Share it out to others who may be interested. And you guys are amazing. It was great seeing the new faces in here. It's great seeing the old faces in here. I missed a lot of you guys, and it's great to see you guys back in here. Besides that, guys, don't forget to love yourselves. Don't forget to love each other. And don't change a thing about yourselves. You guys are absolutely amazing. Thank you to anybody that donated to the channel via those links. Thank you for everybody that supports the channel. Just in general, you guys are amazing people. Much love to each and every one of you, and I will see you guys very soon. Good night. God bless. Bye-bye, everybody.
It was on the screen. shadows bringing wrongs to right, digging deep in the data, facts sharp as a knife. With every single story, he's fighting for our lives. A voice for the voiceless, he won't stay quiet. Daniel's got the fire igniting the fight. True crime revelations shining through the night. With every victim story, he pulls at the strings. A hero in the darkness, hear the truth he brings. Streaming loud and clear, cracking cases open, hearts filled with fear. These channels are beacon in a world gone wrong. He guides us through the chaos, a soldier so strong. The clicks and the lights, they follow his lead. With every new case, he plants a new seed. Sharing their stories, giving hope where it fades. Daniel's a warrior through the trials he waves. In a world of silence, he shouts out their names. Daniel's got the fire igniting the fight. True crime revelation shining through the night. With every victim story, he pulls at the strings. A hero in the darkness, hear the truth he brings. From the shadows you rise, streaming loud and clear. True crime revelation shining through the night. With every victim story, he pulls at the strings. A hero in the darkness, hear the truth he brings. Daniel's got the fire igniting the fight. True crime revelation shining through the night. With every